13th. It is now 5:30 p.m. and I will call our meeting to order. Everybody's had an opportunity to review the agenda, I assume. Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I don't see any problem with the consent agenda, so I would move that we accept that as presented.
Thank you. Does anyone have any other input on the consent agenda? Any items you would like pulled? Seeing none then, all those in favor? Thank you. And with respect to the overall agenda? Councillor Hibbs, you're up again.
Nobody else was jumping to the gun. So I would move that we adopt the agenda also as presented.
Thank you. One last opportunity for adjustments, additions. Not necessarily a huge change, but just on item 6.3 for our capital works. I understand that Manager Mitchell is not able to join us this evening, so Director Thompson will be looking after her presentation. So that's one small change is listed. So all those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Mr. Douglas, I understand that you wish to speak to us this evening about the Public Works bank loan. Wonderful. I'll just remind you, for the purposes this evening, I'll have you use the microphone so that everyone in the gallery and at home can hear you. And if the little red light is on in the microphone, that means that it is up and running. It's the red button in the lower left-hand side of the panel. And you might just want to just move it a little closer to your, there we go. Perfect. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. There are more positives than negatives. Thank you for receiving me so that I'm able in person to tell you about another great thing.
Mr. Douglas, my apologies. I have inadvertently hit the off button on you. My apologies.
That's okay. Thank you for receiving me so that I'm able in person to tell you about another great thing, potentially, of and, is this still on? Of and for this wonderful little city of Lacombe, which we're all proud of. And thank you, all of you, Lacombe City Councillors, Mayor Creasy, CAO Matthew Gowdy, all city employees, administrators, workers of all kinds. We, the citizens of Lacombe, appreciate you. Compliments abound about Lacombe and area and always have. There are more positives than negatives. I want to talk to you today about a topic which I had brought forward a while ago, maybe 5 years ago, about an area which I suggested then to Lacombe City Council, and an area which I had suggested be designated. In any event, I notice and I'm excited about plans going forward of a new public works facility soon elsewhere in this city. That therefore would and will enable Lacombe to have a plan of action for the public works shop, yard and nearby area as we know it now. Simply, and no work or minimal work required. Leave all existing structures, buildings here in our current public works yard and area. Simply leave all those buildings intact for all sports and culture. And paramount for all of that, paramount and necessary for all of us, for everyone, parking. Proper, pristine parking among the entire area between here at the current public works and at the current public works yard and shop. Proper, pristine parking among the entire area between here, the public works shop and yard, and Lacombe Gary Moe Ice Center Sportplex. Parking is paramount. It is necessary. It is useful and critical for many sports and culture functions, plus potentially provide overflow parking near the high school, or all schools for that matter. A pristine relaxation and park-like atmosphere with primary intention to include all sports and culture in this space. The same entire vicinity between Emmy Global and the city of Lacombe Gary Moe Ice Sportsplex, thereby accommodating everyone in every possible way. Buildings all existing already to house the clubs of lacrosse or soccer or tennis or rugby or you name it. Any and all sports or culture. The piles of gravel and material will obviously be relocated near to and at the new public works facility elsewhere in Lacombe when the time comes. So I implore you to designate this area now and implement a plan of action with this idea in mind. A minimum of cost when the time arrives to utilize the entire area efficiently and in the best way. And the compliments about Lacombe will continue to abound. Even more compliments about Lacombe by implementing this strategy for this prime area of Lacombe and our abundance of cool activities. Compliments about Lacombe and all of you will continue to abound as they already do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas. Appreciate your input. It's always interesting to hear from citizens, especially when it comes to ideas for the future, and I appreciate yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Is there any questions from any council members at this time? You're going to take it easy on you.
Thank you so much, and please take into consideration everything that I've said. We've got a wonderful city here, and that would make it even more wonderful. Thank you so much for all that you do.
Appreciate it. Thank you. So I believe we can move into presentations, and by the looks of some faces that are unfamiliar to myself that we have joining us, we've got some individuals here from Barrier-Free Alberta. Welcome to each and every one of you. I understand that Christopher, you're a member of Barrier-Free Alberta, rather, and Mazan is as well, and Sam Mason. So who will be leading the presentation today?
It's a shared project.
Okay, very good. Well, the floor is yours. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mayor Christie, and thank you, councillors, for having us today. We've got a short presentation we'll share with you, and again, we're just so excited to be able to do this. This is a first for Christopher, Sam, and myself. Again, we are Barrier-Free Alberta, and we are looking for legislation for an accessible Alberta. Next slide, Sam. Alberta Ability Network is an initiative of Cerebral Palsy Alberta, and Barrier Free is a grassroots initiative that grew out of the Alberta Ability Network. And our main purpose is to get a strong and effective accessibility legislation passed in Alberta. Sam, next slide, please. And the purpose of the legislation is to establish a framework to address disability needs. Human rights and other legislation does not address structural or other barriers which exclude persons with disabilities. And targeted regulations address single specific issues at a time and tend to accumulate, producing a complex web of policies. Next slide, Sam. Actually, Sam, why don't you take this one?
Absolutely. So for accessibility legislation, we require that it is effective. That is something that we're pushing for. So there are legislations across the country. Every province except for PEI in Alberta currently have accessibility legislations to varying successes. So we are pushing for effective and strong legislation, which use standards of accessibility to remove and prevent barriers across sectors. It applies to all areas under provincial jurisdiction, including municipalities. Set out clear mandates and not rely on any voluntary compliance. Includes some mechanism of enforcement, whether that be reporting or fines, something along those lines. Include the disability community at all stages, nothing without us. and evaluate outcomes and monitor progress.
Next slide, please. Go ahead, Sam.
So we have over 6 million Canadians aged 15 and over report having a disability. In Alberta, our most recent statistic is from 2017, and it's 21.7% of Albertans aged 15 and over. So that is nearly a million Albertans report having a disability as of 2017. And that is only increasing as we age and as the effects of long COVID settle in. This is a huge amount. I do believe this actually might be you, Christopher. Is it spending power? Is this yours?
That is a place where I can jump in here, Sam.
There you go. Perfect.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you very much for having us. And thanks, Sam, for the handoff. Yeah, I'm here to talk about numbers and to give some of the color to it, because I am actually a person with a disability. I live with sight loss, and so this directly affects me, and it does in every province. The numbers, as you can see on the screen, you can read them better than I can, so I'm not going to read them to you. But you know, the numbers, that the potential that's here is not only for the spending power that people with disabilities themselves and their families can bring to Alberta, but it's also the tourism dollars that can come to Alberta, including the city of Lacombe. So there's ample opportunity here for a lot to be gained by the province of Alberta and the municipalities and cities within, to really do wonderful things to break down barriers for all people with disabilities, not like myself with sight loss, but people with mobility challenges, cognitive challenges, hearing impaired. You know, it's a whole gamut, and there's a lot of opportunity here to if this legislation can move forward, and with your support, and Maison's going to touch on that more in just a moment, but with backing from folks like yourselves to say, yes, we also think that Alberta needs this, we can get this initiative moving so that we are not the last province to bring this into practice here in this country. We will leave last place to PEI if we can. And so, Maison, I'm going to hand that back to you.
Thank you. Next slide, Sam. And so the financial benefits again, and we will, if you haven't already received this PowerPoint, we will definitely send this to you. Again, we could be the last province in Alberta to have a legislation act, but we want to get it right. And so we are doing this painstakingly by meeting with individuals who get to make a difference, who make decisions for these municipalities to continue to move this forward. Alberta legislation for those with disabilities is not something new. It's been on the books for 40 years, way before our time. But it's a time has come where we have to have this. This is a human rights issue, and we're asking municipalities to support us as we continue to forge ahead with this legislation. Sam, next slide, please. This is a number of acts that are already in place, or conversations around acts with support of provinces. Again, I will leave you for some bedtime reading. Next slide, please. All right, so what we're meeting here today is to ask the City of Lacombe councillors to visit our website that Sam will provide for you. We have a support letter that we're asking to send to our government, our provincial government, asking for them to pass this legislation. Of course, there's a timing issue. We are in a leadership race right now, but it's taking us as a community organization a very long time getting others like you, and again, thanks again for having us make this presentation, to send this message home that this is something that we need to do, and we're hoping sooner than later that Alberta will pass a legislation for persons with disabilities and have a barrier-free Alberta where everyone is included, where everyone is part of a community, where we can just make our lives, improve the quality of our lives, enrich the quality of our lives, and be accepted. I'm not sure, Mayor Kissy, how you do your thoughts and feedback, but if there's any that you would like to have. And Sam, if you can just put up the website on, can you share the website on a shared, I'm not sure if you can or not, so that folks can see where to hit that support letter button. If not, this is what it would look like. And so on, we already have a letter prepared for you that you can sign on it and send it to us. We forward it or send it directly to the MLAs. So we've done all of the heavy lifting for you. We're getting this message across, and we haven't met anyone yet who think this is a bad idea. So we're looking for your support, and we thank you for your time. Not sure if you have any thoughts or questions for us.
Well, thank you, all three of you. We appreciate your presentation for starters. I think that's a fairly safe bet, is that I don't think you'll find much opposition in this room either. I think Lacomb's been pretty proactive in trying to advance making our city accessible as we can, but there's always room for improvements. We fully recognize that. I think one group, I don't know when you were speaking with our administration, if you've spoken to the Team Jigger Foundation here in Lacombe, that's headed up by Jason Lunn, who's been very proactive on this very subject and has done some excellent work in the area and on an individual basis as well. So I'll certainly going to be forwarding him your contact information if that's okay. And in the meantime, you're hoping that we look at your website and perhaps consider contacting government officials to accelerate as much as possible, for the reasons you mentioned already, the idea of passing this legislation. Is that correct in a nutshell?
That's the ask. Yes,
Okay.
Indeed.
Good.
We're also always shopping around for a council that will bring this forward to Alberta municipalities. So keep that in mind. I think the deadline has passed for councils to bring anything up for this year, but we are shopping around anyone who wants to champion this. Wonderful.
I think we do have a few questions for you. I assume you're prepared to answer a few. That's okay.
Absolutely.
Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. So I'm just looking at the Provincial Accessibility Acts, because my question I had written in my book is what kind of legislation you are looking at. So do you have one of these acts from another province that you say that's what the one that's on the right track, or do you have a draft of what you are proposing for Alberta that we can see somewhere? Because it's a little bit just to say, hey, we need this, but not really have any specifics of what you're desiring for our province makes it a bit harder. So that's my question.
All right, so thank you for that. So basically the acts that exist, we have taken a look through of all of the acts and looked at what is needed and what is lacking in some of the acts that exist and what isn't. The role of our Alberta Ability Network is not to write the act. That's the government's role and responsibilities, and have the funds to do that as well. What we're asking the government to do is to bring it as a to a point where they can start working on a legislation. And those of you who know how legislations work, the community initiatives bring it to the government, and then they go forward with this. We have met with the various ministers who's responsible for that and their supporting staff, providing them with all of our information. And where we are right now is they will come to us for recommendations. But all the acts as it is, I'll tell you right now that no one act is the end all and be all. They all have their flaws, and they all have their good things that work for them as well. What we're hoping for is the language that it's a must, not could be and should be. We're looking for effective legislation and, above all, accountability, because most of these acts don't hold any water. As you know, the federal government passed their act in 2018, and we're years away from having any accountability on that. So we could be last, but we want to get it right. And so again, it's not for the organization itself to write the act. This is for the government to do so, and we will act as consultants as to what works and what doesn't work. And also, we have forwarded a list of all of the acts as they exist to the ministers involved, and they are going to be, they have people apparently looking at them and finding out what works best and what has not worked. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. That was an excellent question by Councillor Hoekstra, so that's tick, that one's answered. I do have a few other follow-up questions, however. So if I think if I heard in the presentation correctly that you said approximately a quarter of Albertans report living with a disability. So that's a very impressive number. And if the government's trying to be responsive to, people that live in the province, like that's going to hit a lot of people. I'm just wondering if you could potentially elaborate a little bit on what, qualifies as a disability, because I think unless you, have one, you might not be very familiar with sort of what that spectrum might look like. So if you might just elaborate on that. And then I have another question or two to follow up, please.
Thank you, Sam, and I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, so disability is ever growing. It's an umbrella term that has been seen to kind of shift and change over the years. I know for the Accessible Canada Act, they used one which was passed in 2019, so that handles everything at the federal level. They used one similar to Nova Scotia, so it is actually, I might as well just pull it up because I'm not going to get it. It's usually temporary, like it includes obviously permanent disabilities, but it's temporary impairments. It is, episodic disability. So we're looking at MS, you're looking at even HIV has been included into this. Anything that might impact your ability, I guess, not to change that, but it has grown quite a bit as a definition. So I know impairment is very important, and then disability. So I can pull up the Accessible Canada Act definition if you want.
I don't think that's necessary, but I guess what you're trying to say is it's something health related that's going to impact your ability to, be in the labor market, right? That it impedes your ability to participate. Is that essentially what you would be saying? So it really could be a broad spectrum, like you said, anything from MS to, something short term, like maybe would something like cancer be involved in that? Would that, okay.
It can be,
And
yeah,
then-
absolutely. So it says any impairment, including a physical, mental, intellectual, cognitive, learning, communication, or sensory impairment, or a functional limitation. So that is a huge, huge gambit.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. And then the other question that I had then was to do with, you mentioned social programs and AISH was brought up in particular, that would provide a greater opportunity for workforce participation. Could you elaborate on what that means as well? Because I don't think that the average Albertan, if they don't have familiarity with something like AISH, they'll understand what that actually means. So if you could just elaborate on that, please.
Christopher, I'll let you take this one.
Thanks, Mitan. And thank you, Councillor. So AISH, the Alberta, what is it called? Alberta
Income for the
Income
severely
for the severely
handicapped.
handicapped,
Yeah.
which is a horrible term, by the way, because not many of us like the word handicapped anymore. But it is a form of income provided by the provincial government. It is a source of income to provide people with disabilities who cannot work through other means or because of their disability. It provides them a level of income. What we are proposing and what we are encouraging is twofold. That we want to see this legislation do is that, one, we want to give people an understanding of how they can make life accessible to people with disabilities so that they can be gainfully employed and they don't have to be relying on social programs. And this is one of the arguments that we are making is that the more people that we can get employed, gainfully employed, get into proper accommodations in their education streams to get gainful employment, then that will mean less people relying on social programs like AISH, and which benefits all taxpayers in Alberta. As more people come off of those social programs. And so one of the things that we're hoping this act will do, and I'm going a little bit to a tangent here, but one of the things we want it to do is to lay out a framework and some guidance, because many people want to be accessible with their businesses or their organizations, but they don't know how. So this legislation can help to inform that so that they know how to be accessible to as many people as possible, breaking down all possible barriers to employment, to education, to leisure activities, all of those things, so that people with disabilities can have as productive and meaningful a life as every other Albertan.
And if I may just add to that very quickly, AISH is very, very stringent on who can get on it and is deemed by how folks can't work. So there will always be a section of the population that absolutely cannot work. But for a lot of our folks that are currently accessing these programs, it is not necessarily a physical reason that they are not able to work. It is that they didn't have access to that education. They didn't have access to post-secondary, or even if even if they got an injury later in life, they aren't able to retrain. So it's not that everyone will be able to work necessarily, but we have these barriers, these structural and attitudinal barriers in place that this act is hoping to eliminate, at least a lot more of them, so that more people can access that workforce.
Chief Gowdy.
Thank you. I just had a question for the presenters about this concept, a follow-up question, I guess, about the definition of disabled and the identification of approximately 25% of Albertans, or 1 million people, as disabled. That's not actually accurate, though, if 600,000 of them are being classified as disabled simply based on being senior citizens. Is that correct or no?
Sam, I'd like to
So
take that.
being a senior citizen does not make one disabled, correct?
Oh, no. I have, like, it is a self-identified disability survey that was done in 2017. That number that are on those slides, and actually maybe we need to revisit those. I think those are actually from 2012. So that 4 and 6 is actually from 2012, and our current 21.7 statistic from Stats Canada is a self-identified 15 and over. 21.7% of Albertans. So when you extrapolate that, it's about 950 identify as having a disability and not as a senior.
And that doesn't take into account on the under 15 age.
Yeah, anyone under 15 as well.
Thank you. Anything else from council? Well, Ms. On, Christopher, and Sam, we certainly appreciate your knowledge and sharing with us tonight. Thank you for your time. And I expect that you will be in touch with our administration and keep us up to date on happenings. And we look forward to, or I should speak on behalf of myself, I look forward to seeing your website and the information contained in it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
This
Thank you.
opportunity. Bye-bye.
So for our next presentation here, we have 2 members of the Caris Village here to talk to us about a tax-related item. We have Mr. Merle Jacobson, who is the co-treasurer of the Caris Village Housing Society, and Mr. Peter Kuipers, co-chair of the society. I'm glad you're able to make time with us during a busy farming time for you, Peter. Appreciate being here.
Good. Thank you, Council, and to the administration that's here as well. We appreciate you taking time once again to listen to some of the challenges that we have, as well as some of the good things that are going on in Caris Village as well. And last week we held our grand opening finally after 2 years of delays. And, I think it exceeded our expectations as to the turnout and the interest, and already even this week, some very serious interest and lots of discussions happening around how the village will work for them now and into the future. Peter Kuipers is here with me. He's one of the originally founding board members back in 2008, and retired owner of General Appliance. And Peter's knowledge of the community has added a lot into the development of Caris Village. And I'm Merle Jacobson, co-treasurer, just coming to the end of my second term. pressure to renew for a third term. I'm retired from AFSC and just recently retired from farming as well. So we appreciate the work that City Council and the administration has done worked with us over the past many years, but most of it's really been in the last 2.5 years. So we've been working at it for well over a decade, but the real hard work began in late 2018. Since then, work that you've done with us is started out working with Alberta Environment to obtain permission to do co-development of Caris Village and the Henners Pond Storm Sewer Outlet concurrently. That was one of the big holdups that we had in order to proceed with the village, was to have that storm sewer outlet put in. So we appreciate that happening rather than us having to wait till it was done. We might not even be just started building last year rather than 2 years ago. You assisted us with the installation of underground power lines along CNE Trail and 72nd Avenue. It was kind of unexpected requirement, and we appreciate the assistance that happened with that, as well as working with the administration on installation of the perimeter fence around our current phase to be deferred until the perimeter duplexes are constructed, rather than having to do little bits and pieces of fence, wait till it's all done and have one consistent fence around it. And then lastly is the assistance with the cash flow deferral of property tax payments for the past couple of years on the vacant units within Chinook Villa. So the past 2 years we've been a challenge. We have lots of learning through that period of time as well. But really we've had much lower uptake of life leases, especially within Chinook Villa, than what we had planned. And one of the challenges when you build a condo building that size is you can't build it in pieces like you do with a house or a duplex. You got to do the whole thing, regardless if it's leased out or sold or not. And so we're about a year and a bit behind where we wanted to be. And it creates some challenges around a few of the areas. We've also learned that for a person to make a decision to leave my home and move into a seniors village like Caris Village is a lot harder for people to make that decision than what we ever dreamt. So the years leading up to it, we had lots and lots of discussions and with individuals and had a long list of everybody, I'm ready to do it. But when it comes down to actually making a decision, it's much, much harder than one realizes. And the emotional anxiety that we see people going through has been a real learning experience for us and changed kind of the way we approach things and how we help people work through that. Our marketing has focused mainly on Alberta. We've done quite a bit across Canada as well. And what's interesting is that, there's only 5 or 6 that have come in from the city of Alberta, or the city of Lacombe. The rest from outside of Lacombe, and a growing number from Ontario and BC. As their housing markets are just skyrocketing there, they're able to come here for what they consider a real deal into a nice facility. And so we're seeing more and more of those people moving in as well. We believe that 2022 is a turning point. We've already leased out at this point as many as we did all of last year, and we're not even halfway. And we just did another one today that came out of the grand opening last week. So right now we're just past the 50% mark of Chinook Villa leased out. All the duplexes that are constructed at this point are leased, and now we're beginning the planning for the next duplex. See where it comes out with construction costs on that as well. One of the things that we've been able to manage both through the development of the land, development of Chinook Villa, and all the duplexes is on every single one have been slightly under budget. So even in these uncertain times, we've been able to manage the costs through that so that we're able to not have to have price increases during construction. And so when we indicate what the price is, we'll be able to hold to that. I think people value that and not knowing, was it tomorrow, is it going to be something different? So that has led now to people having more confidence in the work that we're doing there as well. So one thing we're also finding with our marketing decision, the strategy that we're seeing is when there was only a small number leased out, people, I got lots of time to make a decision. But now they're seeing some of the units that people kind of had their eye on starting to disappear. It's creating that sense of urgency now, and we're seeing that more in people as well. Plus, they're finding it much easier to sell their homes. So when we started out in 2018 trying to do pre-sales, was kind of at the low point in some of the real estate market. People going, well, you know, I've lost so much that I can't afford to sell. I have to wait. But now they're saying now probably is the time to take and sell. So we're seeing more of that happening around the higher lease levels and the sense of urgency. This is the first year we raised the monthly fees since we set them in 2018. So we set them prior to even dirt being moved. And they held until now. So we had to do just under 3% increase. And most of that was around insurance and common area utilities were the two that really drove the cost of that as well. But we structured the finances of Chinook Villa so that most of the expenses are variable and increase or decrease based on levels of occupancy. And we really only have three costs that are fixed. So whether you have one person or 100% occupied, they stay the same. And those costs are building property and liability insurance, common area utilities, utilities on vacant units. Of course, it's variable, goes up and down based on that, but it causes us some sleepless nights, and property tax. So in the first two, we're able to manage to a certain extent. Insurance, we can customize the level of coverage and the types of coverage that we want. And the insurance company has been really good in making some customized insurance policies for us, but also the residents as well, for those that come in, because it's not a rental, it's not a condo, it's somewhere in between, and they're able to come into their contents insurance at a very reasonable cost. Our utilities and common area and vacant units, there's two things that we're able to do to manage that. One is monitoring the temperature. Vacant units, we don't need to keep them at 23 degrees. Much cooler is good. And as well, we did regular tendering of our utility needs. And just before all the price increase, we entered into a very long-term contract for gas and electricity with a provider. So it stabilizes our costs for the next number of years, but it also allows the residents to have that low cost passed on to them as well at a stable rate. So it really doesn't impact what happens on their monthly fees for the common areas. Their own units were able to enter into that as well. So lots took advantage of it and have a very low cost utility. Property taxes, though, comes the hardest for us to manage. It's by far our single largest expense by multiples. And it also had the largest increase in it in 2022 over 2021. Even when we look at December, when the supplementary tax notice came out for the duplexes, it's still using that one, which is the total for the year compared to now. It's our single largest expense, single largest increase. By the time this phase is done, there's still 5 more duplex buildings. The property tax on this phase will be around 200,000. By the time this development of the village is done, property taxes will be in excess of $1 million. So the property taxes are charged back to the residents on a per square foot basis. So as long as it's all leased out, everything works fine. We do, however, spend quite a bit of time talking to the residents that there is not duplication of payment because they look at it, well, our monthly fees, we're paying for roads, sidewalks, underground utilities, we're paying property taxes for roads, sidewalks, underground utilities, and we spend a lot of time saying, you know, the city of Lacombe, their responsibility ends when you drive into Caris Village. That's when ours begins. And it's hard concept for lots of people to look at where they're used to my driveway is where it ends, not where the street ends. So the main reason we're here is we're at 50%. Chinook Villa is the one that's causing us the grief. So right now we're at 50% leased out. And so that means around $90,000 worth of property taxes that we have to deficit finance. And so this is now going to the third year of having to debt finance our property taxes. And so we came the last 2 years to the city asking to defer without penalty the property taxes on the vacant units until December end of the year, allowing us to lease out more and be able to charge back on a pro rata based on number of days for ones that we lease out from now till the end of the year. So it does assist us greatly in managing our cash flow, not having to access as much debt. And again, we're asking for that same consideration in deferring the property taxes on the vacant units. However, as we believe we have a number of ones in the works that we feel is probably more reflective of the actual vacancy is where we do 75% of the taxes on the vacant unit. So that's what we had put forward in our revised submission, was 75% of the 2022 property tax on the vacant units, which is about $69,000, be deferred until the end of 2022 without penalty. So thank you, Council, Administration, and Peter and I are prepared to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you for that information. We appreciate it. Councillor Hoekstra, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. First of all, thanks for the grand opening. That was an excellent event, and it was neat to see a huge variety of communities, citizens there checking it out. But it's always nice when you can just walk through without having to talk to too many people. But I'm just going purely on your presentation. You said something about at one point you'll be paying $1 million in property tax.
Yeah, this is phase 1 of 5.
Right.
Yeah.
But won't some of your buildings going forward be tax?
They may be.
What's the word I'm looking for?
Exempt.
Exempt. Okay.
Yeah.
I just found 1 million.
So two may be, but there's 5 more duplexes and 2 independent living buildings as well.
Right.
So
okay.
those ones would be, so it could be 600,000 if the other ones by the time you get there are still exempt.
Okay, fair. Thank you.
You know, the plan is for assisted living and long-term care, and we have not looked into whether that's exempt or not. So.
Fair enough. As you had mentioned, this is not the first time this request has been made from your group, and I just want to start off by saying what you have accomplished for our community truly is outstanding. From the vision that started from Prince's and the Kuipers and a few other families, what are we looking at, 14 years ago or 15 years ago maybe? It really is outstanding. In saying that, I think that the city has helped try and smooth a little of the rough edges where we could. In saying that, however, these aren't public dollars that we're talking about here. And I think it would be a mistake to suggest that everyone in our community is quite as enthusiastic about the project as probably those in this room are. So I just, without being rude about it, I want you gentlemen to take that into consideration, because I mean it when I say the accomplishments to date, I think, are amazing. And I see no reason why it's not going to grow from here on in. I guess my expectation is you're not going to find a lot of dissension among this group to support this in this time. But I think it's important for the community to know that this is not an ask for tax forgiveness. This is a deferral, which is a substantially different thing. But it kind of brings me around to the nuts and bolts of it. What you're asking for is a deferral of call it $70,000 for about 6 months. So in essence, you're not really gaining a tremendous amount. I mean, certainly we're able to absorb that. I mean, when push comes to shove, we're talking like depending on the interest rate, we're talking $1,000 or $1,500 adjustment here by postponing that money for that way. And I'm expecting this isn't a big joyous occasion for you to come and ask for this repeatedly, unless I'm mistaken. So I'm just wondering, what is it that you're going to have, or what is it that you have plans for to be able to adjust to perhaps make things a little more seamless for the taxation on future phases, on the ones that are going to be taxable?
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor, for that question. So even within this phase, we have it, vacant load for vacancy, because you're always going to have a level of vacancy.
Sure.
And there's some other contingency reserves. So once we get to 80% occupancy, we're very, very close to self-sufficient within this phase. So we don't have to be at 100%, because that, it's going to be 100 one day and not the next. So we're a lot more conservative in setting our reserve funds for that. So as we go forward into the next phases, and it doesn't matter which bank we talk to, which consultant was, you have to have enough pre-sales before you start moving dirt, or otherwise you're into the situation that we are. And when we were working on pre-sales, that, you know, it's not Vancouver, it's not Toronto, it's Lacombe. And you take a person to a farmer's field and you say, this is what it's going to look like. You know, they just, you know, in those two cities, you put up a sign and it's gone. Here, it's not like that. So we had to take a leap of faith, and we had some, you know, some supporters who believe in this as well that provided us the financing for Chinook Villa. But we're having discussions with them as well into the future, is we have to have pre-sales before we can start. So that is the only way going forward that we can avoid this type of situation when you do that type of a condo building. So we're already beginning where we have people putting their names down for the second phase, because I'm not ready today, but, you know, 3 years from now, more than likely. So we're already starting to build our contact list for the next phase. Lots of interest in the duplexes, because those ones are around the corner backing onto the lake, and there are some prime locations. So almost all of those ones are already spoken for. And then we're starting to do the pre-sale work on the next phase. And that's the only way we can take and do that, is to have at least a quarter of them, at least before we start construction, and then begin building from there. Versus we had almost none when we started this one.
Right. I think that's a pretty reasonable thing to suggest, that the first in on any development is by far the most difficult. So I appreciate your honesty. And once again, I'm not questioning your business acumen nor your intent here. I just think that's important for the public at large to realize that this has been a significant learning experience for your group. And as a first of, that's to be expected. I'm going to leave it at that. Anyone have any additional questions or comments? Not even any tough questions. Thank you both.
Good.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. I started on this 14 years ago. I thought I'd have 1 3-year term, and I'm still here.
And as this term is up, we convinced them to continue on a little bit yet.
Anyway, it's been good. Thank you.
Perhaps the one term might have been 2 decades, right? I believe that is all the presentations that we had for this evening, and that'll move us into section 6 for our requests for decision. And naturally, the first one up, 6.1, is to do with our previous presentation, the tax. Once again, it's misprinted here. It's not a reduction request, it's a deferral request. Correct, Chief Gowdy? And that is led by yourself. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Members of council, this evening before you is a modified amendment for a deferral of approximately 75% of the taxes associated with the vacant units. At your last meeting, you did ask that we work with the applicants and develop other options, and we felt that this was a good compromise. So given the discussion that's taken place and the past history on this item, we still recommend accepting the report as information. However, should you choose to support the agency, we would recommend moving ahead with that 75% of the taxes associated with the vacant units.
Thank you, Chief Gowdy. Councillor Hoekstra, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I move to honor the request to defer 75% of the estimated property taxes on the vacant units of the Caris Village until December 31st, 2022. Is that sufficient?
Thank you. That is sufficient, I believe. We have any other input with respect to that motion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Then all those in favor? Those opposed? I see none, so that is unanimous. Thanks, everyone. Next item up, item 6.2, I would ask Manager Hackett and Mr. Bausma to make their way up to the presentation area there. Put you in the hot seats. And we have bylaw 495, the Trimble residence designation. Mr. Bausma, you're no stranger to this room, and is here the heritage a little updated since your last visit. Nice. As the Heritage Resources Committee Vice Chair, we appreciate your time being here and helping us. Thank you. The floor is yours, Nancy. I'm sorry, Manager Hackett.
Thank you very much, Mayor Creasy and members of council. Good evening. It's a pleasure, I think, for both of us to be here and present bylaw 495 for your consideration. The purpose of the bylaw is to designate the Trimble residence, which was built in 1901, as a municipal historic resource. The building is located at 5228 53rd Street, Lot 4, Plan 83 HW. The owners have approached the City of Lacombe for municipal level historic designation. This photograph shows you the property as it is now, fronting on to 53rd Street. Interesting property because it also has access to the C&E Trail. That's how it looks today. From fire insurance maps of 1924 and 1930, you can see kind of how the lots were laid out at that time as well, and some of the buildings that are still, the other homes in the area that are still there. In terms of historic designation, the Historic Resources Act of Alberta allows municipalities like Lacombe to designate locally significant buildings or places or sites as municipal resources to protect these sites within their community for future generations. Lacombe is very fortunate to have a number of municipally designated sites, and you'll recall that the most recent one that was designated was the Flatiron Building just about a month or so ago by this council. So in terms of the Trimble residence, that is how it looks currently, or in 2021 when that photo was taken. Historic photo from the early 1900s when it was constructed from the Glenbow Archives. So you can see it has changed a bit. A photo from 1957, so you can just see the evolution of the property, and a little more current there in 2009. And these photos were in the statement of significance that has been prepared for the property. In terms of the history of the building, I'll turn it over to our Heritage Resource Committee Vice Chair to just talk a little bit briefly about the history of the building and the significance.
Thanks everyone for the opportunity to have a few words with you regarding this particular residence. You do have the SOS in front of you as part of your agenda, and I trust that everybody has read it thoroughly and didn't fall asleep. It really gives us a good indication that, as noted in there, it was one of the early grand estates within the town of Lacombe, or in Lacombe, I'll just say, at the time that it was built. If you notice one of the photographs, you'll see a home that is a few doors north. So it was one of the first ones that was built along, quote unquote, 53rd Avenue. And so in that way, it makes it already quite significant. Henry Morehouse Trimble, who actually purchased the lot, he actually purchased a number of lots from in that area. He was also involved within the community quite heavily, and that's really noted in your SOS that you have in front of you. In terms of the architecture of it, it originally would have been considered as an Edwardian four-square, Edwardian in the way that it was at beginning of the Edwardian period from 1901 to 1910, and so it qualifies under that. But as there was a desire to modify some things as time went on, there were a number of additions done to it, including a change in the roof design. But the bones of the original building are still there, and it can be noted in a number of different areas, including the window presentation on the second floor, as an example, is one of those areas. Even with the modifications that were done as noted in the SOS between 1926 and 1940, without understanding exactly when it was done, it still qualifies as the the trump point of 50 years or older that we would be using as a consideration for any properties that wish to have a municipal historic designation. The owners have been wonderful to work with, incredibly good to work with. They were the ones who actually approached us initially, and we were very excited to do that. That particular street, as you all know, is beautiful. Lots of mature trees, beautiful older homes, and it is generally very well maintained. This particular home is well maintained as well. If you've driven by the last day or so, you'll notice that they've been doing some painting on the exterior. The shutters are off, but those will all go back on again. And so it's nice to see that the owner is really taking time to make sure that this continues on as a valuable property within the city of Lacombe. So the Heritage Resources Committee took all this into consideration, and we made a decision a number of months back to request that the owner's request be approved. And here we are today to hopefully receive second and third reading. Thank you.
Thank you. And so it is recommended jointly by administration and by the Heritage Resource Committee that council give second and third reading to Bylaw 495 as presented to designate the Trimble residence as a municipal historic resource. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. Appreciate the presentation. I have no reason whatsoever to doubt what you've said in that report from start to finish. My question is, I think that when most people compare the historical photos of where the property started and as it transformed into modern day existence as we know it, there's very few people would recognize it as being anywhere associated with this building. And I'm just curious, at what point does a property, when is too much modification or too many changes too much to make it lose its historic value? I mean, when you compare the photo taken there from the early 1900s, I mean, from the roof to the wraparound deck, I mean, it is substantially altered, is the most polite way to put it. I mean, so that's my only question that I have.
Great question. We have to grapple with that to some degree as well. But in your report on page 15 of the SOS, you'll notice the exterior design at that particular time from 1957, which still qualifies it as older than 50 years old. Those renovations had already been done at that particular time. Mm-hmm. So even though the picture directly above that shows it as it's in its an original state, obviously the people who owned the buildings after Trimble's decided that they needed to make some more changes, enlarge some spaces, etc. So therefore, because of the fact that it looked like this and it still continues to look like this, and this photo from 1957 does not clearly indicate that it was done that year. It would have been done, as we had noted in the SOS, upwards of 1940 at the latest. So that still qualifies it as part of the whole requirements to follow through with the designation.
Thank you.
And if I might, Mayor Creasy, I would just add also that its association with Trimble, who is a former mayor of Lacombe and a pioneer and had many contributions, continues to be significant. Even if the house was even if the building was modified a little bit or modernized, that the association with the founder, one of the founders of Lacombe, is still significant.
Great, thank you. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. You indicated that the interior has a lot of the original bones to it from the original house itself, right? So I think that the exterior being changed and so on, part of the reason I support this is the fact that it has those bones still inside that give it that character that we're looking for in heritage homes, right? So I would be willing to make the motion that we give second reading to Bylaw 495 as presented, to designate the Trimble residence as a municipal heritage resort.
Thank you, Councillor Gullickson. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I just have a question. If this property ever is sold, what does that protection dissolve? Like if it's that current owner sells it, what if the future owner has no desire to protect his property or frankly, to demolish it? Like what's stopping to protect us? What's the process, or is it just currently with this owner's wishes right now?
Mayor Creasy, through to Councillor Ross, the designation, if approved by council in a municipal designation process, it will be added to the land title. So it would transfer on to a future landowner. It is meant to protect the building for the long term and not just with the owner. And they have signed a notice of intent document recognizing they're aware of that. So any future buyer would be made aware of that, of course. If it was damaged in a, I don't even want to say it, but if it was damaged in a bad storm or something was found to be with the building and they did in future need to demolish it, they can, the process is they can appear before Lacombe City Council and ask for that designation to be removed, and it is a bylaw to remove that designation. Of course, we would hope that wouldn't happen, but there is a process for that in the future for an owner if they felt it was necessary.
I mean, certainly a fair enough question. I think really this is a fairly involved designation, and hence the reason why it does go with the title. And I guess by its very nature, in all likelihood, is to sell to people in future years who share the interest in preserving it and keeping it going. So, but a very fair question, and I think a lot of people wonder that. What is the advantage? What are we really accomplishing here? And that is the whole idea of it, is trying to protect it for future generations. Mr. Bowsman.
I'd like to make a little bit further comment related to both the questions that or both comments that were made. You do see in your SOS the interior photos. The interior photos are provided to show you an indication of how well the owner has maintained their property. Keep in mind that the character defining elements that are listed in that SOS are the only items that are being designated. Okay, so as an example, the two fireplaces, which are absolutely beautiful, well maintained, one upstairs in the master bedroom and one in the living room, they are not being designated. Okay, so if someone came along and purchased the house and wanted to completely renovate the interior to a modern design, they would have that opportunity to do so, because it's not a character defining element. So the owners had requested certain things be excluded. And if you read through all the other 8 SOSs on the other designated properties within Lacombe, you'll find that there's very few reference to interior items. The Fraser McDonald, as an example, does have a map on the exterior wall, the east wall of the building, that inside, that is part of the designation. So the intent there is that it never is destroyed unless an act of God or whatever, right? So that is the intent here. So the owners were cognizant of the fact that if we designated everything, that may cause them, more frustrations at the point when they need to move out. They have absolutely no intentions to sell at this particular point. Of course, that could change tomorrow, but that's what they have indicated to us. So the interior shots are for helping you understand how well this particular owner has taken care of their property.
Are there any other comments or questions? So with respect to the motion for second reading that's before us, I don't see any need unless someone wants it reread. Very good. I will call the question then. All those in favor? And I see none opposed. That was unanimous as well. Is there any desire for additional motions? Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I would love to read out. I'm just finding my page here. That's the wording. I know it was on 115, so I'm just finding it. Thank you. I just, before I make that motion, I have the privilege of spending many hours in that house, and it is a beautiful home. Our son took piano lessons there, so it is quite neat to see it brought to this point. But I'm quite in awe of the commitment that the owners made to new foundation and all kinds of things through the years. But anyhow, I move that council give third reading to bylaw 495 as presented to designate the Trimble residence circa 1901 as municipal heritage resource. Is that what that means, CA? Anyhow.
You bet, absolutely.
Sorry, is,
No, you're correct.
yeah, okay.
Yes, it's actually historic.
Oh, we have heritage resource in our. Oh, do you want that changed?
Manager Hackett, I believe you were just thrown under the bus.
So do you want me to change that?
Perhaps,
Amended?
perhaps now that you've heard the correct reading the way it ought to be, just the final couple of words. to make
Up
sure that
there
it's
is the
correct.
history. Okay, as a municipal historic resource.
Very good. Everyone's clear. Any additional comments? All those in favor? And once again, there was none opposed. Thank you both. We appreciate it. And onwards onto capital works upgrades, item 6.3. As stated earlier, Director Thompson, you'll be presenting this item to us. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy, and good evening, Council. Purpose of this agenda item is to update Council on the 2022 Capital Works Roads Renewal Program and request approval for the revised 2022 Roads Renewal Project List and Budget. There are updates in the RFD that speak to utility projects and roads growth projects or road projects related to Lacomb's growth. And there are updates provided in the RFD. The main component of tonight's presentation is on the renewal portion, which is refreshing current roads like for like, not generally including upgrades to the road system. And to be clear, tonight administration is not requesting a budget increase. However, we wanted to make sure that council is aware that the 2022 renewal program includes renewing 71% of the planned road area for 91% of the budgeted cost, the overall budget, I will say, for the roads renewal program. This is due to two main factors. One, higher than estimated costs resulting in less work being tendered to stay within budget. And two, the deferral of some projects originally planned for 2022 during their pre-design assessment. So during the preliminary design phase of the project, the Engineering Services Department verifies if a roads project should proceed or not based on the most current field assessment. And they do this two main ways. The city's consultant confirms the road is not degraded to a point where a mill and pave renewal is no longer viable. The roads that degrade too far will require expensive rebuilding. And two, underground municipal utilities under the road are camera inspected, and a determination is made on whether or not their replacement is warranted within 10 years. If the deep utility replacement is needed within 10 years and relining is not an option, the roads renewal project does not proceed because the utility replacement requires rebuilding the road anyway within 10 years. If relining is an option, the project may or may not be deferred depending on the specific situation. With the benefit of the underground utility camera inspections and additional investigations since the adoption of the 2022 budget, administration recommends deferring the following 5 projects. 58th Street from Sini Trail to 44 Avenue. 58th Street from Fairway Drive to North Star Drive. Sini Trail from 46th Avenue to 50th Avenue. Highway 2A. There's a section right on the southern city limits, 150 meters. Sini Trail from 43rd Avenue to 44th Avenue. The 2022 Capital Road Program includes the remaining planned 8 sections. College Avenue from Deer Street to Cobb Street, Woodland Drive from Bruns Road to Lincoln Park Boulevard, 34th Street from Highway 12 to Range Road 264, 60, and so 2 sections on 63rd Avenue, a section on 52nd Avenue, and a section on 50th Avenue east of the tracks. Based on the current market volatility, it's difficult to predict how much these cost increases will impact the 2023 budget and the 10-year capital plan. The U.S. Energy Information Administration published a report in May of 2022 that indicates that by the end of 2023, oil prices may fall from $100 per barrel to $95 per barrel, or approximately 5%. However, the New York Mercantile Exchange places its confidence, I'd say, very low, and there are predictions between $38 and $200 a barrel. So this indicates there's not consensus amongst economists who look at the future oil prices. The projected 22 budget capital program surplus of $163,000 will not be sufficient to complete the 2022 projects proposed for deferral tonight to 2023. Depending on market conditions, some of the 2023 projects may also need to be deferred to maintain that year's planned funding. For the 2023 budget deliberations, administration will present 3 options. One that maintains the current budget and reduces the number of roads rehabilitated, another that increases the budget to meet the proposed rehabilitation goals, and the third that is somewhere in the middle. Design for the 2023 work has begun, and updated budget numbers will be available this fall, allowing council to consider the cost implications on the capital program over 2 years. Council has any questions? I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Director Thompson. Of course, no one likes when prices rise and we have to do less work, but I think that's a reality and a way that we can respond to it happening, just like we chose to increase the amount of work that we did when we thought the pricing was favorable. So I expect we will hear from some individuals who, with that, the choices that were made on that list. However, as you outlined, that was made on sound choices and the reasoning why. I appreciated that. But yeah, once again, I expect it won't be received well by some members of the public, but that's the choices that we have to make. Councillor Dallas.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I guess my question is, in past years, have we run into this issue as well, where our planned projects have had to be postponed due to underground work that needed to be completed as well and pushed into following years as well?
To Councillor Dallas, we'll certainly, as we present, we have a budget, and if the tender numbers come in higher, in the past, we've presented options to council to consider and generally hold the budget. Do you want to approve a budget that includes the whole program or some other option in between? And so in this case, we have the benefit, I guess the new benefit of having a more comprehensive road condition assessment that we can use and rely on, as well as a priority framework that was adopted for information from council when they heard the asset management roads update. And so using those 2 factors, we plan our program, say, at a high level for the next 10 years. And then as we get closer to the actual years for implementation, that's when these refinements come in, and we're looking at the underground, and we're looking at the road condition assessment of the day on the actual, on the ground, and making decisions that are using good engineering judgment on the day. And so there is some variability between the time the budget is made and the design is completed.
Director Thompson, I realize we're kind of early on in our asset management strategy. Was that a factor in these decisions? Were you able to glean any information that helped you come to the conclusions and the choices that you made here from the asset management?
To Mayor Creasy, certainly. I mean, there's roads on this program that probably wouldn't be done at all without the benefit of the condition assessment and the understanding that it is much cheaper and more effective, and your dollar goes farther by applying renewal strategies on roads before they get to the point where they're more expensive to rebuild. And so there are roads on this program that I imagine some people would say, well, that one over there is actually much worse, or the road in this area doesn't look like it needs to be renewed. Not yet, but the cost of rebuilding that road is 4 to 5 times more expensive. And so we can renew and kind of keep good roads looking good. That's a much cheaper and much more cost-effective strategy than doing a worst first strategy, which just focuses on the worst roads. And then you're putting a ton of resources and money into just dealing only with the worst roads, where if they were to be deferred 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 more years or 5 more years, the cost to rehabilitate them is only tied to the inflation costs. It's not tied to different renewal strategies that would have to be applied.
So wonderful. I know there's been a lot of work, substantial effort that's went into that program. And it's nice to see that it's even early on that we're actually seeing some benefit from it. It's paying off. So appreciate that answer. Thanks. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So I'm concerned more of, okay, where would we stand for timeline? We still have a concern of water loss. And I guess it was my thought process was to join that research or focus on the water loss with road improvement at the same time, which only makes sense. So where are we at in trying to establish more of a pinpoint on water loss when really I'm sure they're probably in some of the worst roads, the streets of being the oldest streets. And I guess there's two sides to rehabilitating some of these roads before they get to the higher cost, but we still have some extremely poor roads, like for example, CNE Trail all the way from Research Station all the way up to the 5-way stop, like, or, you know, or across from the post office, for example. Like there's certain areas that are still the worst ones. Like it's almost like I can see your focus on asset management to prevent them from getting to a higher cost of replacement, but we still have some of the worst areas that are not even, like you say, not worth facelifting, for example. So there's a fine line there. I guess I'd look at the water loss part with the road and support of the road tax to pool that all together to focus on more than 3 areas. But what timeline are you looking at more of trying to get more of that information available for possibly area of roads of planning out for the next 3 or 4 years?
Thanks for that, Councillor Ross. And certainly water loss is a component, and there's I&I, so water getting into the sewer system, and then any age failures that occur in those underground pipes. And so for sewer and storm, those we camera those lines, and we can see if there's any visible infiltration or issues. Then that certainly affects the timing of the roads program, so that those things can occur concurrently. For example, there's a pipe on CNE Trail, and the reason why it's been deferred, and it's mentioned in the report, is because the entire pipe has been completely deteriorated and is flushed down the line. Like literally, the pipe is the clay around it. And so those things we learn and incorporate into the timing of the roads program, so that can cause a road to be deferred, so those things align. With respect to water loss, the short answer is we are too soon to narrow it down to specific roads and where those losses occurred. We're in the process of doing a water audit and characterizing where those losses are coming from. And it may be that they are just unmetered sources. So it's something we're still investigating. We are relying on break history from the utilities department and known leak locations to drive decision making at this point regarding roads timing, and so that is still occurring. You had another question regarding. You had another question, and I'm not recalling it.
Just trying to collaborate all 3 together with the road tax. The purpose of, and my support of road tax was to give more tools to administration to, well, like the roads, but I mean, like obviously with the water losses, you know, we may have to do a major capital investment into an area to stop that problem, I guess.
Right, and so it's I think these things have to happen concurrently. The investigation of the underground utilities and developing an action plan or implementation plan for those, concurrent to continuing to pursue roads renewal projects. Because in an ideal world, we have all the information we need and we're making decisions comprehensively and very pragmatically using all of this data and information. But the time it takes to develop that and gather that and incorporate that, it becomes very, very complex, and it is very time intensive with, you know, a long-term payback. And so to wait for that would mean also no roads are being done. And so in this case, we're running things concurrently. And so certainly there is a risk that with any roads project that doesn't involve replacing the full replacement of the underground, that there is something that occurs underground. And there may need to be a section of road dug up in order to conduct a repair or address an issue that occurs after that road's been renewed.
I appreciate you bringing that item up, Councillor Ross. I know that's an item of frustration for council and administration, like the whole infiltration and water loss thing, both. And I think for somebody watching this from the outside is probably wondering, quite honestly, what we're talking about. But those two items do result in some significant costs that is borne by basically spread even amongst the utility users in the community. And as much as we'd all like to have them fixed sooner as opposed to later, and to be upfront about it and honest with everyone, I think that we also have to recognize the fact that a lot of those problems could have very well existed for the last, pick a number, I don't know, 75 years really. But they basically became more of an issue since we were on the regional systems, and the rising prices of utilities have made it far more noticeable. And we have been metering them to realize that there is issues. And yes, I get it. Never quick enough isn't for me either. But it is being worked towards a positive end, and I think that we have to not necessarily grin, but we have to bear it for the next. I think, like we've discussed before, I mean, this is more apt to be a 10 or 20 year item than it is to be a 2-year item, unfortunately, to come to some level of satisfaction that we're all hoping for. That's my ugly dose of realism for tonight. Councillor Connick, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just for my own clarification, you mentioned here that 2023 pre-design investigative work is underway for next year's program, and that in 2022 we just did the CCTV. I guess I'm curious, did we do CCTV last year? Like, could we not have foreseen this deferral? I think it's just a real shame, like Councillor Ross had alluded to, C&E Trail north or south of 50th. I mean, I can remember at Coffee Council 3-4 years ago that had come up, and that area has been bad for a while. I'm just wondering if we'd done the CCTV last year, could we not have seen that this area was a problem and then maybe switch things around, or did that not occur last year?
I think Councillor Connick, the answer is yes. If it was done last year, it could have been foreseen and then reallocated. In the same way we're presenting that today, the reallocation of some projects, and it was not done last year. This is the first year where we utilized our asset management planning for the roads as a year one. And so a lot of our projects got reset and reallocated, and our priorities changed based on that new information. And so this is year one. And then so we're doing year one and the planning for year three. We want to tender 2023 this year, so we have some firm budget numbers going into council for 2023, and so that we'll always be a year ahead, so that we're making decisions about the following year, funding for the following year in the previous year, so that items like this are less likely to come up.
I mean, just follow up quick. So going forward, then the plan is to do CCTV every year going forward now?
To Councillor Connick, certainly if there's an underground main on the road that's up for renewal, then we will investigate the underground work.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. No, excuse me. So I guess, yeah, my first question was poorly conceived, and executed. So we've renewing 71% of the planned road area for 91% of the renewal budget. So I know we have 9% left. That doesn't leave much for continuation on this year. But in my mind, next year we have 130% of work to do. And then, you know, the same conditions happen again and delays happen. And then the next year we have 140%. I'm just making sure we have contingencies and additional projects in place for when we find these, that we can still do some work and make sure that things are happening so that it just doesn't continue to stockpile to the point where we can't keep up again.
So I'll just say, based on our current budget numbers and the pricing, if it continues, if it stays where it is, we will not have the funding available to catch up in 2023. We will, if the funding is capped, then projects will be deferred unless they come, like, there's an engineering solution that is much cheaper than we're anticipating. So this fall, we're going to present council with options to hold the line on funding, catch up with the, hold that, or present a budget that includes addressing all the projects that we plan to address, or some hybrid option of both. And so I guess we're here saying that is a concern of ours too.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Director Thompson, it's now on these projects that have been deferred. Now we're going to get some people calling us and whatever, asking why this is happening, and we have some answers. And they'll say, well, is it going to be done in 2023? And I think you may have just answered that question. Can we say it's going to be done in 2023? These projects that have been deferred, because there's again, other projects lining up, but these ones will not be deferred.
To Councillor Gullickson, so we will be tendering the 2023 program. That includes the ones that are deferred to 2023, and based on the investigation that's underway, the ones that can be done, that are already slated for 2023, we will tender that package, and then we'll come forward to council with a full tendered package. And if that package is funded, then certainly it will be done in 2023. If it's not funded, or there's some other options that administration is to look at, some of those projects that are planned for 2023 or deferred to 2023 may need to be deferred further in order to meet council's, or to adhere to council's direction.
Did I follow up? Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just regarding that, I mean, there's some of these projects, looks like it's been deferred because there's a real issue that needs to be addressed. And by deferring it another year would be a real problem. I have, like, the sewer issue where the sewer line is no longer there. I have a problem with that. Is that something we need to look at to make sure that it is going to be there, and that these ones will have priority over the ones that are just coming up, is I guess what I want to see.
To Councillor Gullickson, certainly that becomes the driving force in terms of priority. And if there's something this year gets deferred till next year, they are a priority and one of the factors in selecting for the 2023 program.
So, Director Thompson, in general, though, those items that have been seen as being a priority in a previous year, and the portions that have been cut and deferred to the following year, chances are likely that they will be addressed prior to a whole host of new issues for that current year. Was that a fair assumption? I mean, I think we all realize it's based on need, but generally speaking, it wouldn't have been identified to have been a priority in a given year, and then all of a sudden it doesn't even rate as a priority after being deferred. That wouldn't hardly make sense.
When we're deferring, yes, and when we're deferring projects, we're deferring them to maximize the investment into that road section. And so if we're deferring a project this year, it's because we think that there's an opportunity that we want to explore to maximize that investment with underground replacements. Now, that deferral might be 2023, or it might be sometime in the next 10 years, sometimes, depending on what else is going on underground to maximize that investment. And if a road is bad now, and there's no way to take advantage of a cheap mill and pave renewal, then we're trying to time and maximize our dollars for, in the roads program overall by coordinating them together. So that's what's going
Fair
on.
enough. Appreciate it. Councillor Ross.
Thank you,
Oh,
Mayor
I'm
Creasy.
sorry. Did you have something to add to the previous comment, Chief Cowdy?
Yes, I did.
If
Thank
so,
you,
go
Mayor
ahead.
Creasy. So Director Thompson has answered the questions that are asked, but I'm going to infer a question that I think is lying behind some of what I'm hearing, and that is, will C&E Trail be paved in 2023? And the answer is no, not unless you put in more money, because the money that was allocated was for rebuilding of the road and repaving. But what our analysis has shown us is that there are significant underground issues that need to be addressed. Now, this isn't apocalyptic. This happens actually fairly regularly. And so we are going to be presenting options for what you'll have to look at for replacing it in 2023 or rebuilding in 2023. But there will be funding implications or project implications. So you'll either need to look at stretching out the proposed asset management maintenance of the road program, or reallocating funding or raising revenue in some way. That is the issue that really we're bringing tonight. And I know that C&E Trail is a major concern. I drive it all the time. It is a concern. I want to see it paved. And so that's something we're looking for a solution for that, but I expect that it will take more money than has been set aside right now for the project.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I think this is just the start of reality of the inflation and the costs, and this 2023 budget, I think, is going to be the most difficult budget we've had in all of our times in council because of that. Bottom line is, just like it said, it's, do we want to fund it or postpone it? And it's going to be incredible to deal with these costs moving forward. I guess one thing is lobbying the provincial government for increased MSI funding, because obviously every municipality is going to be going through the same situation. And I had a brief discussion with Theo Gowdy about that this morning. You hear hundreds of millions of dollars going to public transit, and you wonder, okay, what's the number in these major cities of funding per citizen? Is that fairly put down to the other municipalities who don't have the industrial or commercial tax base? And I just, is there an effort to even go that route? You never know unless you ask, I guess. I think this next budget, everybody's going to be, it's, what's inflation today? What do we go by July 1st, if I'm correct, from previous budgets? What is that inflation? Do I dare ask?
They don't post it until August for the July data. But sorry, I jumped in there. Is that right with your indulgence? I'm sorry. One thing that I'm excited about, actually, that relates to what you're talking about, is that the mid-sized cities have a bit of an initiative going right now where they're looking at that very issue to say, many cities, ourselves included, are dealing with a lot of issues that are dealt with in larger municipalities, and the per capita funding ought to reflect that reality. So there is some action actually lobbying that very thing. Timely that you bring it up.
It certainly does continue that way. Thank you for that, Chief Gowdy. I think that there's a realization taking place that to expect one funding model for every community other than the two major urban areas to be suitable for every community across the province is very unrealistic. So it's us to keep the pressure on and make sure that they understand fully. I would suggest that we have a minister in that position now that does understand, and the work that was done with the previous minister as well. They do understand that there is a significant deficit in our infrastructure. This is one indication of it. But on a much smaller level, I'm just curious when you had said that the renewal program on, I was just curious if that included parking lots. Like say at City Hall. And seriously, the only reason that I bring that up, I know it was a tight boat, and I'm just curious if that would have been different had we have realized all of the financial decisions that we make need to be justified. I get that, and it's not a colossal amount of money in comparison, but I do truly wonder if the boat would have went that way had we have realized that there was other areas of the community that are used by far more people on a daily basis than what the refurbishment of the parking lot at City Hall is. Not that we need to revisit that, but it did come to my mind. Director Thompson.
To answer a question about, which I think was, are the city's own parking lots included in the asset management priority list? The answer is no. The answer is no. And so they are currently on a worst first demand type basis.
Thank you. Councilor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Cruz. I would make the motion that council approves the revised 2022 capital project list and budget as presented.
Thank you for that. Is there anything additional anyone would like to add? If not, we'll vote then. All those in favor? And I saw none opposed. That's unanimous. Coordinator Balabano, thank you. Get on the right page here. All right, and Director Lapointe, you're up next, I believe, with item 6.4, the shared micro mobility pilot project in reference to the presentation made last meeting, I believe.
Feel honored to present such a light topic after the one we just had. So good evening, Mayor Creasy and Council. This evening, administration is presenting the Roll Technologies shared micromobility proposal for Council's consideration and approval. As you know, Roll recently presented a proposal at Council's May 24th, 2022 meeting. Roll uses an app-based program where riders utilize a QR code to access available scooters. Users are able to ride and park anywhere within the designated service area. Some of the proposal's main points include an exclusive 2-year pilot period, that the scooters themselves are limited to a maximum speed of 20 kilometers an hour and are not permitted on highways, meaning say that travel out to Midway Center would not be possible for now. But outside of that, use is for the most part open-ended. Geofence perimeters allow for slow speed zones, no park, no ride zones, and then finally just no park and no ride zones. A patrol team will collect and redistribute improperly parked scooters. And finally, the app supports local businesses by providing a new channel for advertisements, offers, and promotions. To implement the program, administration recommends council delegate the chief administrative officer the authority to determine routes and standards and adjust those routes and standards as required. Administration plans to regulate scooter use in line with current enforcement levels. Also, should the proposal move forward, administration will look to work with Lacombe County to review the possibility of providing a through access via Rosedale Valley, as well as north along 58th Street, also known as Range Road 270A. Roll estimates 3 to 4 weeks to plan, organize, and launch the program. The program guidelines are constructed from best practices established in other communities. Roll is already active within. And administration will use the pilot period to evaluate the program and provide any recommended amendments for inclusion in the 2024 traffic safety bylaw update. Administration is recommending that council approve the Roll Technology shared micromobility pilot program as presented. And with that, I'm open to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Director Lapointe. Councilor Hoekstra, had you light on early? Go ahead, please.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I was intrigued. I saw these all over Red Deer, but I guess I'm a little bit concerned about the 2-year exclusive pilot. Because in other communities, it wasn't exclusively, unless I misunderstand, like Red Deer had 5 different companies that piloted. So will we run in, because this still is private enterprise, so that they would get exclusive rights to do this. I'm concerned about that, or is the city as well, or, yeah.
Chief Cody?
So actually, Lacombe Regional Tourism originally reached out to explore the possibility of bringing initially more than one. I think they contacted 5.
Yeah, four to five, I would say, yeah.
5 companies that were operating in Red Deer and other municipalities. The vast majority of them, all but this one, expressed either no response or concern that it wasn't yet a viable market here in Lacombe. So when we talked to Roll, they felt that to offset their investment and make sure that it was viable, they wanted this exclusivity. At that time, we felt actually that made sense because from a pilot project standpoint, we don't really have the resources to be interfacing with 4 or 5 different systems at one time as we're trying to make changes about parking areas. And so we really wanted to hone in on the correct parameters of the program before opening it up to more contractors or service providers. However, we've not explored with them a shorter exclusivity, for example.
Councillor Ross, you had your light on earlier. You wishing to speak or no? Very good. Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Christie. I for one am excited about this. I know my 2 oldest have utilized these scooters in Edmonton and quite enjoy them, and look forward to using them here. I don't have a problem with the 2-year exclusivity. I would rather have just one, try it out for 2 years than 10. Well, there isn't 10, but anyway, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'd rather have just one, take a crack at it and see if it works here. And the presentation was excellent. I had some concerns, but they were alleviated through the presentation. So I'm prepared to make the motion that council approve Roll Technologies Incorporated Shared Micromobility Program as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Connick. I haven't had a chance to weigh in on this, and quite frankly, I think there's probably other councillors that are perhaps more excited about this, but I always enjoy having new amenities for our city. I too happen to share the view that the exclusivity is very problematic for me. This is a free enterprise venture. This particular company is frankly doing very little for infrastructure or investment in our community. And all that's kind of a small factor in my decision. I just don't know what would make us feel obligated to give anybody an exclusive on a business in this community. We made that perfectly clear with liquor stores. We made that perfectly clear with cannabis outlets. We made that perfectly clear with everything. And to change route right now and or to grant somebody an exclusivity when it was clearly stated there are no other companies that are necessarily interested is just quite bizarre to me. I think it's highly irregular for us to do that. I think on one hand, I admire this company for stepping forward and making a presentation. And quite frankly, I think that first in is probably going to win in most areas anyway. But for us to grant the exclusive, I think could potentially do more harm for our reputation as being a market-driven and open place to do business than what it's going to gain us over one particular type of business that's being presented tonight. And for those reasons, I would like for us to explore the possibility of removing the portion of the exclusivity and at the same time welcome the company with open arms to do business here. But I think that one portion of it for me is kind of a deal breaker for the reasons that I've stated. Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. My comments were actually going to center more around the safety aspect of this. Is really my only concern with it. But seeing how this other topic was mentioned, I have some thoughts on that as well. I typically would agree that I don't like showing favoritism to one business over another, but if that's what it takes for a business to take a chance on our community, I think I'm okay with that. I do think that we need to be a little bit careful about talking about how we offer exclusive deals to attract business to this community, because we do have a track record of doing that periodically. So in this case, I'm okay with this. It is a limited 2-year exclusive. That's not to say that that will continue in the future. After that point, I assume that any business would be welcome to, make bids. I would certainly be insisting that that would be the case. So returning back to my safety concern. One of the things here is it has to be 16 years, an operator has to be 16 years or older. So that's a bit of a concern, because I know that I've seen people that are definitely younger than 16 operating these in places like Red Deer. So I'm just curious as to what happens in a situation like that. Another situation that I saw recently when I was in Regina was actually 2 people on a scooter. So again, is that counter to what's allowed? Because it doesn't actually mention that on here. And if that is the case, again, what happens in a situation like that? Are we expecting bylaw or LPS to be dealing with that? That is, I guess, my only concern when we start talking about a program like this.
I would expect that we've got administration just clamoring to get in and answer that question, because quite frankly, it's a private business. I think that it is my hope that our involvement in this business venture, which is exactly what it is extremely minimal. But feel free to answer Councillor Hibbs' questions, because it's rather interesting.
Again, I think at the moment, the regulations around the e-scooters themselves via the traffic safety bylaw are that they're permitted. And so there is no enforcement from the bylaw side of things at this point. So I venture a guess that, hazard a guess that you're correct here in this case, Mayor Creasy, that we would not be expecting any sort of enforcement from the bylaw side of things at this point. As I understand it, in Red Deer as well, I think they do take customer service inquiries around the scooters themselves and then document what those concerns are and send them on to the service providers so they're aware of the concerns. And those numbers are quite low. If I understand, there was probably about 60 complaints last year, both of which you've talked about low age of drivers and double or triple people on a scooter as well. So that's how they manage that issue.
Certainly, Councillor Hibbs, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, so it's not that I'm necessarily want to throw a bunch of resources at it. It's just those 2 specific items, because we're talking about potentially unsafe, driving practice, whether it's a hazard to themselves on the scooter or to, say, motorists or other pedestrians or something, because I'm going to assume that, and I'm not going to say every child that's 15 or below has bad judgment, but I mean, that's just part of life. I mean, that's literally what you're designed to do as you grow older, right? Is gain. So bad decisions are going to be made. And then also with 2 or worse 3, heaven forbid we ever see that. But again, it just makes the operation of that vehicle, because it in fact is classed as a vehicle, unsafe. So I guess that's my only concerns. And I know that there are going to be residents that have the same concerns, because they want people in our community to be safe. It's not about us being mean big brother. It's about keeping both the riders and those around them safe. So I guess what I want to hear is that it's not a hands-off completely. LPS or somebody will intervene in the situation where they see, I should hope, significantly unsafe practice. But I'm not suggesting that bylaw or LPS be watching them like a hawk, because I don't think that's necessary either. What I've observed, again, anecdotally, for the most part, are people being reasonably responsible, certainly as much as I see people operating regular vehicles.
Speaking as a once irresponsible and poor choice making 15-year-old, I would be shocked if those types of things did not occur. But quite frankly, I don't think the impact on our community is any worse on a scooter than it would be on a bicycle or a longboard or any other type of device that we allow on our trails and streets. So your point's well taken. I think we want our community to be safe, but once again, this is a private business. Who's first over here? Councillor Gullickson?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Well, I think if you have been to Vietnam or Cambodia, you know you can fit 16 people on one of these and 5 chickens. So just to let you know that, it's not a problem. Oh, and a bundle of something else. My concern would be liability to the city. Is there any, if there's an accident, and is there any liability coming back to us? Because they would think of us as the big dog here.
Chief Cuddy?
I mean, I don't think it's been tested thoroughly to see, and in cases where people are injured, I find they often cast a wide net. So I suppose that's possible. You would have insurance for that. So there wouldn't be any significant financial exposure for the city. One thing I did want to mention is that really at issue this evening is the approval of this company storing the property on public land. The issue of safe operation of an electric scooter, for example, is actually completely separate. I can go and get an electric scooter right now and give it to my daughter and let her ride it around the street. And there's no regulations against that. If she were behaving in an astronomically unsafe fashion, yes, I expect a bylaw officer or a police officer or anyone else would say, hey, that's not acceptable within our community. But it would have to be extremely unsafe before that occurred. We actually talked internally even about beyond the exclusivity, whether the city is actually able to restrict this company from coming here. Because again, using that example, if I choose to ride an electric scooter and secure it with a motion alarm, there is nothing stopping me from leaving that scooter on the street, on the sidewalk, or locking it to a public fence. That's a perfectly legitimate option right now. And so what you're seeing here is actually just a larger scale of that occurring. Now, obviously, exclusivity absolutely requires the city's endorsement, and I think there are aspects of allowing a company to profit from use of public infrastructure, which is what's occurring here, that the city ought to have a regulatory involvement in. But as far as ensuring safe operation of the vehicles, whether it's electric bikes or electric scooters, those are regulated under the traffic bylaw right now, and they are permitted. And there's no requirement for a helmet. There's no requirement for ages. There are many unsafe electric vehicles out there that you can operate, whether they're hoverboards and all these other things.
Thank you. Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I do echo your concerns about exclusivity, but it's the only company that's really gave feedback to want to be part of this project. I understood the presentation coming to Rec and Culture Board that there is an out on either party being the city and or the business, that if it doesn't work out, it could be discontinued at any time. Is that correct, or am I misunderstand that?
Again, we received the same presentation at this point. Maybe you received something a little bit different at the Rec and Culture Board level, but that has not been indicated at this point, although it is commonplace to have an out from either side, either party in an agreement.
Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. As far as the exclusive part goes, I mean, if we want to make it the hill to die on, we can take it out. I just don't see it. It's not a company that's going to generate millions and millions of dollars that we're giving them exclusive rights to. It's a scooter company. I don't know. I don't have a real issue with that. But if you want to remove it, I guess we can. And just to Councillor Hibbs's concerns, yeah, I totally appreciate it, but I know I can probably take my kid's phone, load the app, consent that I'm of age, load up my credit card, give it back to him, and away he goes, right? And I'm sure there are parents that will do that. And I totally appreciate your concerns. It's just, as CO Gowdy, the mayor, has alluded to it. It's really, I don't know how you police that. It's impossible. And I don't think we can in this instance, but the exclusive, whatever, I mean, it's a 2-year project as far as the exclusivity goes, but whatever.
So as a mover, you certainly have the ability to make that adjustment yourself. I know that I would certainly appreciate it. However, in saying that, let's remember that these are not scooters. These are micro mobility vehicles. We learned that with our presentation. Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy, and my apologies to speak to a point again, but the exclusivity is a hill to die on for me because there must be a reason they want it, and we are in essence endorsing a business as a city, and I think that we should steer clear of that. And they are the only one that responded, so why do they need exclusivity? They will have it, that they asked for a pilot, and that they will use our roadways. We understand that piece, but I have a hard time endorsing one particular business over another. That's kind of I would think that's a standard we don't want to fall or do.
So certainly I think it's reasonable to suggest they don't need it, the exclusivity. They want it. And that's just good business for them to ask for it. That doesn't mean that we have to grant it. Would be my comment, but Councillor Dallas.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. On another point, I just want to give a shout out to the Executive Director of the Lacombe Regional Tourism Committee, Austin Weaver, for taking initiative to find this. And then I also want to thank City Administration and staff for proceeding forward and working towards this. That is just, that's everything I want to say on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other items for consideration? Is anybody so inclined to perhaps alter the chance for success and consider removing the exclusivity item, or no? Are we happy with the way the motion as it reads now? That answers my question there. Oh, Councillor Dallas?
Okay, well, I didn't hear anybody objecting to the exclusivity there, so I will make the motion that council approve.
Oh, we've already got a motion on the floor. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mayor Creasy. Is the mover supposed to amend it? Or?
Anybody can propose an amendment, but
I was busy doing this for a moment here. I would like to propose that amendment to remove just that line and welcome them with open arms. 2-year pilot.
okay, with that motion on the floor then takes precedence of the original motion, so we will consider that prior unless the mover chooses to go through it. Very good. So with respect only to the removal of the exclusivity portion of the proposal is what we're speaking on now. Does anyone wish to comment before we vote on that item only? Councillor Ross.
Thank you. Sorry, just a question of process then. This motion then would be brought forward to the applicant of wanting exclusivity, being this company. Then they can decline or accept, obviously, and you may be coming back again. Is that a possibility or what?
So that's not to do with this motion, though.
No, I respect that.
Okay.
This motion is to remove the exclusivity off of the original motion, and it's successful. Sorry, then obviously Director LaPointe will be going back to that company with what is the motion, and then they either approve it or decline what's brought back to them, correct? It's black and white like that.
I would suggest that if there are any changes whatsoever to the proposal that they have put forward, it is entirely within their choice to either accept or decline, certainly. Councillor Hoekstra?
Sorry.
Nope, just light on by mistake, not a problem. So I guess my one final question then, with respect to the ask for the exclusivity, what was the compensation to the city for that, for that request?
I don't believe there was any compensation to the city. They're bringing the program to the city. That was the intent.
Okay. Okay, so for the joy of them doing business here and making money off our infrastructure, they get a 2-year exclusive for showing up. Very good. So, with respect to the amendment to the original motion to remove the exclusivity, I will call the question then, seeing no other comments. All those in favor? And those opposed? Very good. So this is going to go this way for a couple. Any other motions? Actually, we have the original motion now to accept the unfair practice motion as presented. I just forgive my comments. This is absolutely, this is bizarre to me that we are considering this as an exclusive thing. It's just quite amazing. But council rules. Just so we've got the proper motion, please. Ms. Bellabonno, could you read that back to us?
Sorry, that's the original motion that was on the floor.
Correct.
Is that council approve Roll Technologies Inc. shared micromobility program as presented?
Very good. Any other comments before we continue? All those in favor? Those opposed? Creasy Hoekstra opposed will be noted. Thanks, everyone. Director Piche, the next item up here, bylaw 468.1, the community standards bylaw amendment. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy, and good evening, Council. Before Council this evening is the first reading of an amendment to the Community Standards Bylaw number 468. Over the course of the last few months, administration sought to receive feedback from residents on the suggestions that were provided to Council on the March 28th and the May 2nd meetings regarding this bylaw. The feedback that was received through social media, emails, and comments at the farmers market. Of the topics that were discussed, the following are going to be the summaries of the responses of what was proposed and the changes that are proposed to the bylaw. So the vegetation and sidewalks, most of the comments that were made is those that residents prefer the city to be responsible for the vegetation on the sidewalks. There is no proposal changed in the bylaw for this topic. However, administration will look into implementing a weed control program in 2023 and in future years. Regarding the weeds of prohibited noxious versus noxious weeds, many of the comments that were provided did not specifically discuss the weeds themselves, but mentioned issues with dandelions. However, dandelions are not listed on noxious weeds or prohibited noxious weeds that are listed in the Weed Control Act and regulations. Therefore, there is no proposed changes to this section of the bylaw for this topic, and enforcement will be limited to the prohibited noxious weeds. For noise, many people who made comments feel that the snow clearing should be kept to the non-quiet hours of the day. However, there were 2 comments in support of businesses being able to clear parking lots during the quiet hours. Now, this is a struggle between safety and liability of businesses and the quietness for residents. What the proposed changes are is to add a heavy equipment definition and to remove the clause for city contractors only city contractors from those excluded from abiding by the quiet times for snow removal purposes. When it comes to trees and alleys over sidewalks, there were very few comments about the height of the trees over those alleys and sidewalks. But there were more comments regarding shrubs and bushes that encroach the sidewalks that impede pedestrian traffic. So the proposed change is to add the following to the existing clause. To prune any overhanging trees in alleyways to the height of 4 meters or 13 feet from the ground. Prune any trees overhanging sidewalks to a height of 2.4 meters or 8 feet from the ground, and that all shrubs or bushes adjacent to public sidewalks must be trimmed to a minimum of 15 centimeters or 6 inches away from a public sidewalk as to not impede pedestrian traffic. When it comes to parking in, no parking on front yards, the comments that were made about parking in front yards is that most people were not in favor of allowing this in the community. But there were more comments about RVs and trailers blocking sightlines. And there was one comment about the decreased availability of street parking if this is enforced. What the proposed change for this is that no owner or occupant of a premise shall park any motor vehicle, recreation vehicle, or trailer on the front lawn of their property except where there is a properly constructed surfaced driveway. For unsightly premises, there were not many comments about the unsightly premises itself, but about those did comment requested more of discarding dilapidated vehicles, dead vegetation, and graffiti removal, rather than the deterioration of buildings on properties. So there is no proposed change to this clause in the bylaw. However, we do believe that the enforcement of this will be on egregious properties that violate multiple clauses of this or other bylaws. And lastly, the length of grass. The comments received by residents were requesting alternative landscaping, such as vegetable gardens or ornamental grasses. And there was some requested the length to be lowered, and then some requested the length to be longer. So it's kind of all over the book there. But what we do propose is that not a change to the height of the grass, but to include weeds within the clause. And so that will be changed to cut the grass and weeds before it exceeds 8 inches in length. So if council wishes to debate the proposed changes of this bylaw, it is recommended that first and second reading be completed this evening. And if there are any questions at this time, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Director Piché. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll move that council approve the first reading of bylaw 468.1, Community Standard Bylaw Amendment 1.
Councillor Dallas, anything?
Thank you. Sorry, do we have an opportunity to just ask a question here about some of the things presented first?
Not really about things presented. If it's a process question, you certainly do.
Okay, no, then thank you.
But we need to get it on the floor first as well.
Okay, sounds good.
Anyone else? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, any additional motions? Councillor Gullickson.
I'll move that council approve second reading of bylaw 468.1, Community Standard Bylaw Amendment 1.
Thank you. Anything before we vote on, second reading? Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just a question. Does Dandelions fall under the classification of noxious weeds?
No, it does not. It's not listed on noxious or prohibited noxious weed lists anymore. It's just considered a flower now.
It's the salad weed.
Seriously?
Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I have a number of comments and questions actually on this, so if you can bear with me. Sort of to follow up on that comment.
Let's keep in mind, we still have not approved second reading to be able to discuss this. We're still in balance.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
second, a motion was made to do second reading, and now this is the discussion following that.
We can discuss now.
Chief Cowdy, is that correct?
As long as a motion is on the floor for second reading, you are able to discuss.
I appreciate that clarification. My mistake. Thank you. Go ahead.
So yeah, I noticed that in the definitions, prohibited noxious weed is mentioned, but I did not see any reference to a noxious weed. But to follow through with that, 4.2B talks about cut the grass and weeds. Now, how does that definition of weeds relate to either prohibited or not prohibited noxious weeds? Is it just meant to be those two, or is there another definition of weeds that I don't know?
It really comes down to the length of whatever vegetation is there. In the past, when we first had it, where we didn't mention weeds, it was hard to go in and actually enforce on length of whatever that vegetation was. If it was grass, because it was specific to grass, that was easy to tell people, like to enforce about that and have people comply to the grass length. But when, say, on the side of a shed or along an alley of some sort of vegetation, once it was growing and it wasn't grass, it was harder to enforce. So this really allows for, whether it's prohibited noxious, or any type of weed that is over, or at least at 8 inches, we can go in and request that to be complied with, to be cut down now.
Okay, good, because that is my concern, and that's definitely been shared with me numerous times by numerous people, that there are dandelion lawns out there like I've never seen, and I would totally agree. So I was concerned that I would read that clause, and if a dandelion is not a weed, then it would be perfectly legal to have, yeah, maybe your grass, because it's so unkept, is like struggling at 2 inches, but the dandelions have taken over, right? Like I'm literally seeing that lawn after lawn this year. I don't know if it's just because I'm more hyper aware of it. I don't think so. I think this year is just unusual. So if you're telling me that that section will then address that we can't have dandelion lawns, then I'm okay with that. Another situation here is, so it's talking about dilapidated vehicles. So I'm skipping down a little bit further in that section. It talks about, no person shall store dilapidated vehicles on their property, with the exception that a vehicle is in the process of being salvaged, as a hobby. Now, of course, there's no time frame on this, so that just can be indefinite. All they have to do is say that they are working on it. They don't have to demonstrate that anything, is happening. The reason I'm bringing that up is just because, again, yard after yard, complaint after complaint, and I hear this from, multiple people, that they feel like these vehicles are just sort of being stored, on the property, likelihood with no intention of actually ever doing anything. It's just simply, I don't know, they can't get rid of it, or I don't know what it is, but I'm concerned that there's maybe not an adequate addressing of that situation, because I feel like it's never being addressed in the city. Like something is holding back that being, addressed. So I'm just going to leave that as a comment. I don't necessarily need an answer back at this moment. I'm just bringing up these as feedback that I don't feel like were necessarily covered in maybe comments on Facebook. Another thing is 4.5, the parking on the front lawn. I guess I'm assuming that we're using the definition of a front lawn via the land use bylaw, because, like, for example, where does the front lawn end and the side yard begin? And, we see that where vehicles are parked in rather peculiar places. Is that the front lawn? Is that the side yard? If there's no fence, it gets a little bit hard to tell, and you're kind of defeating the purpose when, it's not okay maybe in this kind of gray area, but it's perfectly fine to junk the rest of the yard. Like that doesn't make sense. And I also wonder, like, when we're saying that there needs to be a properly constructed, driveway, or like, why is that only in the front as well? Like, why is it okay to park willy-nilly in your backyard? And how are you supposed to properly maintain your property when you're just allowed to do whatever in your backyard or your side yard? So again, not requiring an answer, just giving you that feedback. And I think that is the end for me. Yes, it is. Thank you.
Thank you. We may need a definition for willy-nilly, though. Appreciate your input. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Cruz. I just wanted to be more clear if some way through the description be any and all vegetation, including like your noxious and prohibited weeds, because if you say any and all vegetation, that covers everything over 8 inches, does it not? Because does it leave you out of the debate of somebody, the complainant or the defendant of the complaint, saying, well, give me the definition of what's noxious and what, doesn't that just keep yourself and your bylaw out of any debate of who might be a violation of height. It just doesn't, all vegetation just cover everything and keep it simpler for you?
That's a tough question to answer because when you have different types of landscaping, there's different vegetation that could go higher than 8 inches if it was intentional for ornamental. But what defines weeds and things like that, we literally go by the Weed Control Act and its regulations. So it's the plants that are listed within there is what we go by.
Because I kind of echo previous comments about dandelions. Your dandelions could be just exactly like you say. They could be like, and they can argue that. I guess I'm just like I say, it's unsightly when, like you say, the grass could be well below the 8 inches, but everything else is, yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, I was going to comment on that. My daughter has her front yard, there's not a blade of regular grass there. And there's some things that are just there for decorative. You want to go there and give her a ticket? No, you better not. I wouldn't. I wouldn't try it. But, and Cora knows her very well too, so she wouldn't go there either, I'm sure. But I have a concern with some of this, the dandelions. Are you kidding right now? You'd have to go give the Wolf Creek School Division a big ticket. They've got, their whole field is covered in dandelions that are this high. So, no, they can't. I mean, some of the yards, yes. I mean, the city is in violation in a lot of places ourselves with dandelions. It's a really hard thing, but there's not a lot we can do about it.
Councillor Dallas?
Thank you. My one comment is just in regards to 4.5 for the parking on front lawns. I just echo Councillor Hibbs' points. I guess the difficulty with that is, yeah, where's the front yard? And I know some of these properties that I've seen is, yeah, it is parked on the side. So my only suggestion would maybe to be include language, say street facing yard or property, but I know it's difficult on some of these ones. So I guess I'm sorry, I feel like I'm flip-flopping here. I want something in the book, so I want something that we can enforce. So I'm happy with that. But if we can continue to investigate other options, that would be great as well.
Thank you. Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just further to that, I where there's a properly constructed and surface driveway, so gravel is not correct, or is that acceptable? I just want to add, or does it have to be hard surface?
We've been deliberately vague there.
Thank you.
The thinking being that enforcement of hard surfacing seems really difficult, especially in older areas. But with this as written, let's say you were someone who parked a trailer on the lawn. We would come and say, well, that's not a properly constructed driveway. And then they would say, but you might say, define a properly defined, constructed driveway. And rather than doing so, we would say, well, here's your RPR and your development permit. It doesn't show a driveway there, so you can apply. It's a $125 fee. And when you apply, we'll tell you whether what you're proposing is a properly constructed driveway. And we're going to be expecting to see at least 100 millimeters of gravel, at least 6 inches or 6 feet wide, 2 meters wide, and so long.
Okay.
So it doesn't include the specific definition, but it does give us the teeth to say, okay, we actually don't have to do that. We can just tell you to get a permit and you won't be able to. So.
Okay, no, I appreciate that because I think there are many that just have gravel, and if the expectation is that they have the hard surface, I think it's too unrealistic. And my other firmer comment is to echo Councillor Gullickson. We lost the war against dandelions a century ago, so there's no point in trying to fight that fight now.
So the interesting part with hard surfacing, I think, comes when you're applying for a permit is when it is adjacent to a paved city street, then we do require that it in fact it be hard surfaced, but only for a certain distance. Is that correct? I believe it's 6 meters, something like that.
That is in actually industrial areas. In residential areas, the entire thing, if it's connecting to a hard surface, the new standards are it is to be hard surfaced. So you
Appreciate
are
that
correct.
clarification. Thank you. Chief Gowdy, go ahead.
Just a point of interest. You said a century ago. Actually, dandelions were imported during the Columbus Exchange and brought into North America as a food crop. Originally, it was intended to be a.
I think that we could probably supply a great deal of the market share for dandelion tea, salad leaves, and wine making flowers, but yeah, exactly. Coordinator Bellabono. So we do have second reading before us as proposed by Councillor Gullickson. Thank you. Oh, there's another comment.
Yes.
Councillor Hoekstra.
Sorry, this is not related to the bylaw at all. It's just that it says Amendment 1. What is, so you're coming with another group of amendments?
Not necessarily.
No, this is just our very first amendment for this bylaw.
For this particular
Yeah.
bylaw.
So
Thank you.
468.1.
I was thinking there's going to be 10 amendments and I was just kidding.
Well,
as time goes on.
one day I expect there probably will be, but yeah, not at this point in time. Are there any other comments for the First Amendment to this bylaw? I see none, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? I believe that was unanimous. Thank you. Director Thompson, are you in charge of the next item, I assume, by my notes here? The annual review of the 2021-2022 snow clearing policy. The floor is yours.
I am. Thank you, Mayor Creasy. On behalf of myself and my colleagues across the aisle here, Director Lapointe and Director Pichet, I'm presenting on the outcome of the 2021-22 snow clearing operations and providing council an opportunity to provide feedback on the snow clearing policy. Overall, staff were able to meet the service levels outlined in the policy. Because of the nature, it was this report was a cross-divisional collaborative effort. So if there are specific questions, you may need to call on any one of us to answer them. Overall, last year was a lighter snow year. We can see in the statistics under the roads section of the policy or of the report. In almost every category, the frequency of clearing is down year over year compared to last year. That's just a factor of the snow, the type of snow year that it was. There were some notable occurrences that did happen, namely a temporary amendment to the minimum notice period during COVID. That was due to, we were finding, because people were in their houses more and not leaving their houses every day, they weren't necessarily seeing the warning signs. And so we provided additional notice for those who worked from home during COVID. And then there were a few select areas that are outlined in the report that were, let's say, variances for the policy under section 5.3, which allows the CAO to approve such variances in extraordinary and extenuating circumstances. Namely, they are to deal with meltwater or flooding, impending flooding issues, sightline issues, and in one case, a new school that began operations on college. With respect to public feedback this year, it was generally the same in terms of feedback. A number of people are thankful to have the snow clearing operation. A number of people who wish the service levels to be higher, and a number of people in the springtime making comments on the aggregate that tends to collect on the corner lots particularly on those who live on priority 2 streets. There are some policy amendments that we are proposing with respect to the roads clearing area. Those are listed in the policy or in the document, primarily because these are areas that we're having to make exceptions on year over year. So these are trends that there's, year over year flooding threats, year over year some sightline issues, and in one case that school is going to be there year over year. And so because they are year over year exceptions, we are asking council to consider baking those into the policy permanently. In the area of sidewalk, walkways and trails, this is delivered through community services. Service levels were met. Overall, the one comment that I want to highlight council's attention to is with respect to the expanded scope for skating and surface rinks that was applied during COVID, that it was continued in 2022 on Crana and Royal Oak. That was able to be maintained last year and still maintain service levels on other areas of the city. But because it was a below average snow year, we want to say to council that in a higher volume year, that may not be possible. In a higher volume snow year, may not be possible to simultaneously maintain service levels on the sidewalks and trails and provide the prompt clearing of the ice surfaces that the public have enjoyed over the last few years. There's some sample public feedback on the trail system in the report, and from the Community Services Division, there's no recommended policy amendments. With respect to the bylaw enforcement avenue, there's some statistics in the report: 21 tickets and towed vehicles for snow removal operations in 2022, 4 ticketed and towed vehicles for street sweeping in April, and another 31 tickets were written in May with respect to vehicles being in the way for street sweeping. And Bylaw is reporting that they've worked successfully with over 100 property owners to move vehicles and gain compliance with the city's standards without fines. And there were no significant snowfalls requiring bylaw enforcement assistance in October to December, and all bylaw enforcement services with road maintenance crews was provided. Yes. So there's no significant snowfalls requiring bylaw assistance, meaning bylaw had to be called out and a contractor brought in to clear sidewalks. Is that accurate?
Sorry, no, in 2021, there was no significant snowfalls, and then all services for bylaw services was performed in 2022, from January to April 2022.
Do you know how many that would have been in 2022? How many times?
How many times? I don't have that in front of me, sorry.
No problem. And there, from the bylaw area, there's no no policy amendments recommended council's consideration. So tonight we're asking council to direct administration to make the roads department recommended amendments to snow clearing policy for the 22-23 winter season.
Thank you. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I think the city's done an excellent job. Personally, I just want to see a little more enforcement to sidewalk clearing from bylaw, but that's just my opinion there. Some complaints in that area. I'd just like to go ahead and make the motion that council directs administration to make the roads department recommended amendments to the snow clearing policy for the 2022-2023 winter season.
Thank you. Councillor Connick.
Thank you. So I'm wondering if it's still able to make further amendments. Is that possible? Yeah, thank you. Mayor Creasy has alluded to this a few times with the windrows and the removal of such. And I know we've decided that we don't want to do beyond what we do now in terms of removal of windrows, but I was struck by certain areas this year, and I wouldn't have thought of them otherwise, but I drive a bus down them every day. Fairway Drive, for example, we windrow. Fairway, there's no sidewalk. People walk on there all the time during the summer. We've struggled with this in the past, well, what to do there. But then I was struck this year with the winter that we windrow there. And then, so people are now still walking on the road, but further into the road because of the windrow. And not only do we windrow it once, but we windrow it twice. So we do that road more than once. My street out front, we do once. Late in the season, we windrow. I get this huge pile on my front lawn, whatever, no big deal. We do it once. But that area, I was struck that they windrow not once but twice, and there's no sidewalk. I'm wondering if we shouldn't be looking at slowly easing our way into, and I agree with the mayor in principle that windrows should be done away, period, but I think we need to ease into it. And I'm wondering if this is a way to start doing that where, for example, where roads, there are no sidewalks, we do not windrow anymore. We remove that snow. Is that a possibility? I'm just throwing that out there for comment.
Would you care to answer that one now, Director Thompson, or include it with the additional comments later on? What's your pleasure? You're going to defer it? Okay. Chief Gowdy, go ahead.
Yes, that is possible. Yes, certainly there's capacity in the snow storage site that was recently constructed. Of course, every incremental increase in service has an incremental increased demand for resources. And so depending on the specific snowfall in any given year, you'll be slightly closer to the limit of our ability to do it in-house. And so you understand that well. It's just a matter of policy decision for council.
Okay, I appreciate that. No, and I guess I'm throwing that out to council now. I just think, I know we have the capacity. We've more, I thought we didn't have the capacity, but then I saw how much we use there and it's incremental. It's nothing. So we have the capacity to remove all windrow, I think. But as a way of starting to ease into this, I think I'm throwing that to council now is maybe we should start with roads that have no sidewalk on either side, that there should be no windrows, period. I think we do that already on some, but I'd like to see it on all, and Fairway's a really good example, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Connick. So I think I've made it fairly abundantly clear where I stand in this issue, and I think there is a room for some movement forward to better serve our community. I think that, in fact, we do have the manpower. I think that we demonstrate that every snow removal we have and the amount of machinery and whatnot that we utilize to inconvenience ourselves down the road the way that it's stored now rather than removing it from the streets. We already do that in a portion of the city at various locations. And I'm just wondering at one point, well, certainly I would be in favor of moving forward with some sort of a program, even if only on a temporary basis. I mean, it just strikes me as odd that we invested quite heavily in a space to store snow, but yet we choose not to utilize it very much. Currently is odd to me. It still remains by far the most common complaint that we receive at City Hall is due to the windrowing of snow, and that results in a variety of complaints, but they're all related from that very one thing. And as I said, we already do this in some areas, so I think I would like to see it consistent amongst all residential areas, given that everybody kind of pays for it equally. I think that would be certainly justifiable. It is a safety issue, as was alluded to by Councillor Connick. It is a flooding issue, and it certainly is an appearance issue, not just in the winter, but afterwards in the springtime and continuing on with the sand and gravel that remains behind, and a nuisance for people. Of once again, one of the complaints that is related from this that we hear quite often at City Hall. So I think that we have a responsibility to at least look into this. We've got rules are going to be coming down to where we have to do this at some point in time. That's been a clear message from the Alberta government impairment, I believe, as far as the snow storage removal. So it's only a matter of time before it is necessary anyway. I think that I would like to see us be proactive and come up with some sort of a plan to implement this, or at least try it on a temporary basis and just see where it does take us. Either be to give it a cap and a dollar amount or however it is, but there's got to be a way that we can do this to better serve our community. Councillor Gullickson?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just to Councillor Connick's request there, do you know the amount of roads that have those sidewalks? Just approximately?
Not
Not.
right now.
I know though people in Hearthstone would be pretty happy if you did that, because we don't have any sidewalks in Hearthstone, the whole subdivision, so people in English Estates would be a little jealous of us, wouldn't they, for a change? Instead of bad mouthing us. Anyway, didn't say that out loud, did I? I know. Anyhow, regarding the request from the mayor, I mean, it'd be lovely to do that. I'd love to have us remove all the snow and put it in our new snow dump. But to put a fixed dollar amount on it is impossible, is it not, with snow removal? I mean, I've been involved with snow removal for years, including years in Edmonton, and I know that on crazy years, it varies, could double the cost or triple the cost depending on the amount of snow you get. So, I mean, we can say it's $70,000. I think that was the figure, was it not? I think it was.
I think it was 75, but whatever.
75.
Yeah,
I
that
mean,
was
it's
the-
almost, and is that about 0.75% increase in tax? Is that correct? What is it? What would that be?
That would be about 0.5%
Half a percent
increase.
Okay, 0.5% there. So, I mean, we could probably count on maybe a little bit more than that on average, depending on the snowfall. So I don't have an issue with it. I just want everybody to be aware it's going to cost us. And hopefully, you know, it's going to be a tax increase, there's no doubt. But we did increase
I don't think that's a fair statement to say that's a given.
But it is a given. If we're removing more snow, it's in hauling it. It was already stated it's going to be, on an average year, it would be $75,000 extra. Is that not true? That is so.
That was an expectation of the cost for trucking it initially, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, it's going to be an increase. I mean, we do have extra revenue from our franchise fee increases, so we're probably okay there. So
I thought with all the money we were saving on Bolt, we were putting it towards this. Chief Gowdy.
So I guess I just wanted to address a couple of things there. One, your franchise fee increases are required to meet your existing budget, so there's no extra revenue associated. You also mentioned that the people in English Estates would be jealous of the people in Hearthstone and Sandstone, but in fact, there are significant portions of English Estates that have no sidewalk, and so you would be also removing from English Estates.
Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I guess I'm just gonna do my initial comment here first, and then I'm actually gonna address the recent conversation. But my one question, based on the memo that was presented, I did attend a few houses this past winter that had concerns with windrowing. Like, I know we've heard this before, and I'm not saying that I'm thinking that the city needs to get out of the windrowing business right now for the same reasons I've explained before. I think financially, we're just not ready to do that to our citizens. I think that is the end goal, but I like this idea of like easing into it. I've always said that, but I'll come back to that in a minute. So when I did attend a few houses this past winter, it was less about the fact that they were being windrowed, because that's been the case for many years, nothing new there. It was just the amount of windrowing in some places. So there was quite clearly a few properties that were quite bearing the brunt of some of the windrowing practices. And so I guess in one of the situations, the homeowner was able to contact Public Works, and Public Works was able to come and sort of, I don't know, mitigate the pile. And for any of you that weren't actually able to attend the same house, I'm not sure how many of you were also invited, but like, this was sizable. This wasn't like, you know, a hill. This was like a hill, like in some places probably touching the ceiling. You know what I mean? Like, it was excessive on private property. And so I'm just wondering if there's room in the policy going forward to sort of address that, where there's maybe some limitations on exactly how much you can put on property. Like, I get it, sometimes these places have a lot of frontage, but like, honestly, it really was And then by the time it's melting, it's melting. Now we got this rock hard, it literally rock hard. There's nothing that the homeowner can do and just wait for it to just slowly melt into, it's just over the top. So I just thought I'd mention that. But just going back to Councillor Connick's comments about the snow removal, I am in support of that. I think that is definitely the way to go. We do have the capacity as far as we have the facility. It's the capacity as far as the money that I'm more concerned about. But I like the idea of identifying those roads like Fairway, maybe some of the roads in Sands or Hearthstone that are like collector, that are heavily traveled by pedestrian traffic, that it would make it safer if we were to consider removing the snow from those areas that we don't currently.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. My position is when you start removing windrows, I think generally across the city, everybody's going to expect the whole same service. And I will reiterate what my comment was earlier. I think council and administration is going to have a very, very challenging budget. And if I have to pick between identifying water loss versus removing some windrows, when I travel at other municipalities for streets, I think our city does a wonderful job. I'm sorry about the windrows, but at least they're passable. They're smooth. I think in a situation, if there's excessive snow, call Public Works or call the appropriate person. I think they will do their best to accommodate that situation. Just use common sense, I think, can solve that situation. But I'm not in favor of amending the motion. The motion is as point one, and I think that unless a significant amount of MSI funding or other external funding sources come in, I'm still, this is going to be very challenging 2023 for budget coming in that we're going to be going over this fall. So I made the motion as point one, and I'm staying with that.
Thanks, Councillor Ross. So just as a little bit of history, let's keep in mind that for many, many, many years in Lacombe, snow was in fact removed from every street. And the only reason it was ceased was because there was nowhere to put it. We have now chosen to spend a great deal of municipal funds on a location to put the snow, and yet we still seem to be resistant to put the service back the way that it once was. So I'd like for us to consider that as well. Chief Gowdy?
There's just a couple of comments there about the location and size of windrows. And so there is restrictions and definitions within the policy that speak to not restricting sightlines and various safety measures. Certainly, I'm not aware of any windrows that would reach the level of the ceiling here. And if those were brought to our attention, the Public Works would quickly address them. There was also a comment about it being unreasonable to place these windrows on private property, but I want to assure you that we have never and will never place windrows on private property. They are always contained within the municipal public property. Those would be my comments.
Thank you. And I think there certainly is some confusion with a lot of people misunderstanding that the front of their property is an easement, which the city does own. They just get the joy of looking after it and putting up with the mess from it. But in fact, it is city property. There's no question about it. And I think that the overwhelming majority of them are on city property. That does not, however, remove the effect that it has on property owners who have to put up with them and the damage that they cause. So, but certainly a fair point. Director Thompson.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. Earlier, there's a question around how many streets in Lacombe don't have any sidewalks. And I was reminded that we did actually look at that in 2015 when we were doing some analysis on sidewalks. And the answer is 8,747 meters, which is about 8% of Lacombe's roads, based on centerline lengths.
Thank you. Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, I struggle with Councillor Hibbs is correct. I don't know if it's a lot to take on in 1 year, as Councillor Ross has alluded to as well. But I think if we can just, I think we should start somewhere. I think that 8 kilometers, that there should be no windmills on those 8 kilometers where there's no sidewalk on either side. And I think it's easy to justify from a safety perspective. I know there'll be some that say, well, how come you're removing them there and not here? Well, they don't have a sidewalk on either side. I mean, for me, that's an easy way to justify that. And I get your comments, there will be people, but I think we need to start there. Move it on all those 8 kilometers, and then the year after, then maybe we expand the program to get back to the point, as the mayor alluded to, that at once upon a time, all the snow was removed. So I don't know, I don't think we should do it all at once, but we should start with those 8 kilometers. And then maybe the year after we can designate some more areas. That would be my thoughts. Thank you.
Appreciate your sentiment, Councillor Connick, but let's keep in mind, this is not a start. We do remove snow in lots of areas in the community already, but this is certainly a way to increase it. Obviously one that I support, but anybody else wishing to speak? Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor. So I don't know how can we just make that suggestion and that amendment is, or do we have to make an amending motion to the motion to include that, or how do we go forward with that?
So this is still the First Amendment, regardless of a change in this regard. This is still, or this is still the same policy. This to augment this area. We can add that in anytime you choose.
Sorry, if you are proposing an amendment to the snow clearing policy, I would do that through resolution.
So in addition to the resolution that's presented to us tonight already.
Yes, and the way that existing motion reads, Coordinator Bellabono, is what?
The motion on the floor is that council directs administration to make the roads department recommended amendments to the snow clearing policy for the 2022-2023 winter season.
And so if you chose to make an additional amendment, then it's those. Correct. Chief Cowdy?
I do have, if you're interested in making such, or a different councillor is, Director Thompson has graciously provided me some wording, and it would be a motion to amend the policy to haul snow on all residential roads with no sidewalks, and we would update the maps accordingly and bring you an amended policy to pass at a future meeting.
So I would be happy to make that motion after we vote on this motion. Thank you.
So I don't know how we can approve a policy and then amend it. We need to have this included as one of the amendments to the policy, do we not? It seems a little backwards to me. Director Thompson?
I think because the recommended changes do not consider whether there's a sidewalk on the road or not, that there could be an overlap, or if you do one or the other, like there could still be flooding issues in an area of sidewalk. So I think the passage of both, because I believe all of these are hauled away options, the passage of both amendments will result in all sidewalks in residential areas not being hauled away, no windrows, and any that are not on that list, that are on this other list, will also be hauled away in those specific areas. So I think both have to be passed in order, if that's council's intention.
No, I think that's a fair assessment. Thanks for the clarification. So initially then, the one that we have is the current snow policy with the amendments contained in the report, correct? And everybody's prepared to vote on that? And we'll call the vote. All those in favor? And I see none opposed. Thank you. Councillor Conick.
I would be so happy to make that motion that was suggested by Director Thompson.
And that being to amend the policy to haul snow on all residential roads with no sidewalks.
Thank you.
You throw your voice very well, Councillor Conick. Thank you. Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I only had a question. How long ago was it that we did clear all streets? Did you have any idea about that?
I certainly do not have an exact date, no.
I think it would be helpful information for us as councillors to say it was a service that our city enjoyed. So not that, no, you don't, no?
I don't believe that the city.
I think it was prior to it being a city. Yes, to be in fairness, I think it was.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. Because, yeah, like I said, there simply was no place to put it that was deemed viable. So we do have a motion before us, everyone. We're done with input. No questions? On the motion before us, then all those in favor? And those opposed? So noted, Councillors Ross and Hoekstra. Thank you. That is this as distinct possibility, Councillor Ross, yes. One that we will do our best to mitigate, I'm sure. Item 6.7, Senior Manager McKinnon, you've been extremely patient waiting for your item for the Q1 financials. The floor is yours.
Good evening, Mayor Creasy and Council. Tonight, I'm here to present the first quarter variance report for 2022. The timeline of the report is from January to March 31st, 2022. Overall, revenues are $187,000 or 3.4% higher than budget for the first quarter. Franchise fee revenue are higher than budget because there is typically higher consumption during the winter months. Goods and services revenue are higher by $75,000. Interest and penalties is also over budget and favorable by $46,000. 31 of that is from term interest. Local agencies and other sources revenue is under budget by approximately $30,000. Mostly timing differences. And permits, fines, and licenses are also under budget by $39,000. $35,000 of this is a shortfall in the collection of lease fines. Overall expenses are $2 million under budget, or 16.75%. The timing of the payment to the school requisition is a large portion of this, $1.2 million of the surplus. That will be rectified in the next quarter when the payment is made. Other timing differences relate to the transfer to reserves and common services of $167,000, which is currently contributing to $161,000 of surplus variance. Personnel variances are $227,000 can be explained by position vacancies and sick leave. And goods and services is $347,000 or 17% under budget at this point. But we expect the surplus to decrease as the year progresses. A portion of this relates to water and wastewater costs that can be explained as they are heavier in the summer months. The net year-to-date surplus is $2.2 million. As of the first quarter of 2022. The next variance report for January to June 2022 will be presented in August. And as of that, admin recommends that council accepts the 2022 Q1 operating variance report as information. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senior Manager McKinnon. Appreciate that report. Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I don't have any questions, although that doesn't exclude anybody else from asking, but I will move that council accept the 2022 Q1 operating variance report as information.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions during the financials? Who'd have thought you got off so late, right? I will call the question then. For acceptance of the report. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. So I believe that concludes our public items this evening. Other than an information item for future meetings. Those will be on Monday, July 11th for a regular council meeting in chambers here at 5:30 p.m. That's the only one in the month of July. And on August 15th, we have a committee of the whole meeting. Once again, chambers at 5:30 p.m. And then another meeting, this time a regular council meeting here at City Hall at 5:30 p.m. on Monday, August 22nd. So everybody can add that to their calendars, please. And unless I have missed any items, I believe that concludes things up into the in-camera portion. Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I just have a quick question. Can I be reminded why we have back-to-back meetings in August? I just don't remember why that.
The one is a committee meeting, however, so that does change things a
Right.
bit, but I expect there was
Committee
enough
meetings
volume.
Usually the first Monday. I was just wondering why that scheduling.
Fair enough.
Because that's a third Monday and we've never. Okay. We just would never meet on a third Monday. Just curious. I couldn't remember why, right? Because the 1st is the first Monday, the 8th is the second Monday, the 15th is actually a third Monday. And in the whole time I've been on council, we've never met on a third Monday. And I can't remember the rationale. And
that's just to show
I
how
sort of
flexible
might have booked something, but maybe it will be unbooked. Anyhow, I'd like to move into camera.
Well, I think given that you've asked that question, we ought to have at least some verification that that date is in fact correct. I would like to think it was.
Well, it is on the website.
Some items that need to be prepared by administration to be ready for the 15th that couldn't be offered earlier. So.
So I'm confident those are the dates. So your normal meeting dates are for normal meetings are the 2nd and 4th Monday of each month. I thought we have met on the 3rd Monday before, but perhaps legislative coordinator Bella Bono could. I mean, I guess the short answer is because that's the schedule that was adopted by council at the organizational.
Please do not spend a lot of time on that.
So the reasoning why the first Monday was not a committee meeting is it's a stat holiday. The second Monday of the month is scheduled for a regular council meeting, which we canceled. So we moved the committee one to the following Monday rather than the Tuesday.
There's the justification we were looking for. Thank you. And we do have one in-camera item. Did you make that motion? Thank you, Councillor Hoekstra. Appreciate that.